Story 1. Dad remarried and left me with grandma at 5. Now stepmom demands my inheritance, but grandma says no, so I'm 25. I work full-time and currently live with my grandma. I've been with her for as long as I can remember. My mom passed away when I was really young, so it's just been me and my grandparents for most of my life. My dad? Well, he pretty much vanished after my mom died when I was 5, left me with my grandparents and just disappeared. No brothers or sisters, no one else to turn to, just my grandma and grandpa. I used to ask all the time, when's dad coming back? My grandma would always smile, kind of sad-like, and tell me not to worry, but eventually, I got it. He wasn't coming back. So, yeah, it's been me and them ever since. My grandparents were in their 50s when they took me in, and they weren't rich or anything, but they were the best. They made sure I never felt like I was missing out on anything, you know? I mean, I wasn't spoiled, but they got me what I needed, and they worked hard to make sure I had a good life. Grandma, she was a tough one, always working odd jobs, whether it was at the local grocery store or cleaning houses. She never complained, always smiling, always taking care of me. I still remember how proud I felt when I started school. My grandma saved up enough to buy me this cute little backpack with cartoon characters on it. It was bright pink. I think I wore it out in like a month from carrying it around everywhere, even when I wasn't in school. I know it wasn't easy for them to get me nice stuff like that, but they always found a way. That's just how they were. As I got older, I started to realize how hard they were working to keep everything together. My grandpa, before he got sick, had a regular job at the post office. He was quiet, but you could tell he loved me, even though he wasn't the type to show it with words. I'd catch him sneaking candy into my lunchbox or letting me watch TV past bedtime when grandma wasn't looking. He didn't talk much, but he showed he cared in little ways like that. By the time I was in high school, things were starting to get more complicated. My school was a big deal to me. I was always good with school stuff, you know? Studying, doing homework, all that. And I had this dream to go to a really good high school. Not just any public school, but one of the top ones. It felt like the only way out of the situation we were in, like I needed to do something with my life to make everything worth it. I remember this conversation I had with my grandma when I was in middle school. We were sitting at the table eating dinner, and she just kind of casually says, "You know, Jenny, don't stress too much about going to a public high school. Choose the one you like." I didn't really get it at the time, but now looking back, I know she was worried about the money. Private schools were expensive, and even though they never let on, I knew they were struggling. So I said, "But what about you and Grandpa? Isn't it going to be tough if I go to a private school?" She just smiled and shook her head. "We'll manage," she said. "We've got some savings." That's how she always was, trying to make everything seem okay, even when it wasn't. I wasn't dumb, though. I knew they were doing everything for me, so I made a promise to myself that I was going to work hard and get into the best public high school I could. I wasn't going to let them spend more money they didn't have. I studied like crazy. Like I'm talking late nights, early mornings, flashcards everywhere. And when the entrance exam came, I nailed it. Got accepted into one of the best public high schools around. I'll never forget the look on my grandparents' faces when I told them. My grandpa, who barely ever said a word, got up from his chair, came over to me, and gave me this big, tight hug. I swear it was the first time I'd ever seen him cry. They were so proud of me. I think that was the first time I really felt like I was doing something right, you know? Like I was paying them back for everything they had done for me. Grandpa even booked a table at this nice restaurant in town to celebrate. We didn't do things like that often, so it was a big deal. I felt like the luckiest girl in the world that day. But high school wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. A couple of years in, things started to change. I'd come home after school and the house felt different, like this cloud was hanging over everything. I remember walking into the kitchen one day and seeing my grandma sitting at the table, her head in her hands. I asked her what was wrong, and she looked up at me with these tired eyes and said, "Grandpa's sick." I didn't know what to say. I mean, what do you say to that? I was just a teenager, and I didn't really understand how serious it was at first. But it got bad. Real bad. Grandpa was in and out of the hospital, and every time he came home, he looked worse than before. He stopped working, and Grandma had to pick up more hours at her jobs just to keep things running. I felt so helpless. I couldn't do anything to fix it, you know? I tried to keep up with school, but it was hard to focus when all I could think about was what was happening at home. I'd stay up late studying, but I'd also be worrying about whether Grandpa would be okay. And Grandma, she was always so strong, but I could see the cracks. She was exhausted. There were days when she'd come home from work, sit down on the couch, and just stare at the wall for what felt like forever before she'd get up to make dinner. I started helping out more, doing whatever I could. Cooking, cleaning, whatever needed to be done. I didn't want her to worry about me on top of everything else. She'd always tell me, Don't worry, Jenny. Focus on your school. You've got a bright future ahead. But how could I focus on school when it felt like everything around me was falling apart? Grandpa's condition kept getting worse. It was like this slow, painful decline. One day he'd be okay, and the next, he'd be back in the hospital. I hated it. Hated seeing him like that. Hated seeing Grandma so worn out. And I hated that I couldn't do anything to make it better. That's when things really started to hit me. Life wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be fair. And it definitely wasn't going to be what I expected. Things got worse after Grandpa's diagnosis. It wasn't something I could ignore anymore. And honestly, I didn't want to. Every time I walked into the house, it felt heavier, like this weight I couldn't shake off. Grandpa wasn't just sick, he was getting worse, fast. And I didn't know how to deal with it. I was a teenager, and I'd never seen someone I loved just fade like that. Grandma tried to keep it together, but I could see the cracks. She didn't complain, but she didn't have to. You could just tell. There were days she'd come home from work, her shoulders all slumped like the weight of the world was on her. She'd smile at me, ask about school, make dinner like she always did, but it wasn't the same. We both knew it. Grandpa was in and out of the hospital so much I couldn't even keep track of the appointments anymore. Some days he'd be there for a week, other times just a few days. But each time he came back, he looked worse. It was like watching someone slowly disappear. He used to be this strong, quiet man, and now he was weak, tired, and couldn't even get out of bed half the time. It was tough to see. I wanted to help, but what could I do? I was just a kid. Grandma was the one holding everything together, or at least trying to. She started taking on even more part-time jobs. It wasn't just about paying bills anymore. There were the hospital costs, medication, everything. And even though Grandpa had insurance, it didn't cover everything. I didn't really understand the financial part of it back then, but I knew we were struggling. I could hear her late at night talking on the phone with the hospital, trying to figure out payment plans, arguing with them sometimes. I tried to step up, to help out more around the house. I'd make dinner if she was late. I'd clean, do laundry, anything that I thought might take some of the pressure off. I even got a part-time job at the local store to bring in a little extra cash. It wasn't much, but it was something. But no matter what I did, it didn't feel like enough. And honestly, it wasn't. How could it be? The worst part was seeing Grandpa like that. I'd come home from school and go straight to his room to check on him. Some days he'd be asleep, other days he'd be sitting up trying to act like everything was fine. He'd tell me stories, or try to crack a joke, but even that was fading. There was this one day, I'll never forget it. I walked into his room, and he looked up at me with this weak smile and said, "Jenny, I'm sorry." I didn't know what to say. Sorry for what? For being sick? For not being able to be the grandpa I remembered? I just sat there with him, holding his hand, not knowing what to say. Because what do you say to that? Nothing I could say would fix it. As time went on, things just kept getting harder. Grandpa had retired by then, and it was all on Grandma to keep us afloat. I could see how tired she was, but she never let on. She'd say, "Don't worry, Jenny, I'm fine." But she wasn't. She was running herself into the ground, and I knew it. There were days when she'd come home from work, and I could tell she'd been crying, but she'd never admit it. That wasn't her style. And then there was the hospital. It felt like every other day, there was some new complication with Grandpa's health. The doctors would explain things to me, but I didn't understand half of it. I just knew it wasn't good. One night, Grandma and I went to visit him, and he was hooked up to all these machines. He was barely awake, and when he saw us, he tried to smile, but he couldn't. That's when it hit me, like really hit me, that he wasn't going to get better. I didn't know how to deal with that. How do you prepare yourself for losing someone you've lived with your whole life? Someone who's been there every day, even if they weren't the loud, talkative type. I felt like I was losing my whole foundation. I'd go to school, trying to focus, trying to act like everything was normal, but it wasn't. My friends didn't really get it. They'd ask, "How's your grandpa?" And I'd just say, "He's okay." Because what else could I say? No one my age was dealing with this stuff. They were worried about grades or what they were doing over the weekend, and here I was, worrying about whether my grandpa would make it through the night. Grandma started talking about applying for assistance from the government. We'd always been able to manage, but now, we needed help. I didn't know much about how that worked, but I could tell she didn't want to do it. She was proud, and asking for help wasn't in her nature, but we didn't have a choice. I remember the day she went to the city office to apply. She came home with this big stack of papers, all these forms she had to fill out, and I could see the frustration in her eyes. "It's confusing," she said, sitting at the table, staring at all the paperwork. I sat down with her and helped as much as I could, but it felt overwhelming. Eventually, we got through it. And a few weeks later, we got the approval. I thought that would make things easier, but it didn't. It just made everything feel more real. We were now officially on assistance, and that felt like a loss in itself. As Grandpa's condition got worse, I could see the toll it was taking on Grandma. She was still working, still doing everything she could, but it wasn't enough. It never was. There was one night after Grandpa had another bad episode where she just broke down. I'd never seen her like that. She sat at the kitchen table, her hands covering her face, and just cried. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay, but I couldn't, because I didn't believe that myself. We were running on empty, and it felt like no matter how hard we tried, we were just sinking deeper. I was scared. Scared for Grandpa, scared for Grandma, and honestly, scared for myself. What would happen if we lost him? How would we manage? I had all these questions swirling around in my head and no answers. Then one day, after Grandpa had been in the hospital for a few days, we got the call. I don't remember who answered it, but I remember the silence that followed. The kind of silence where you just know something bad has happened. Grandpa had passed away. I didn't cry at first. I just stood there, numb, like my brain couldn't process it. He was gone. Just like that. And everything we'd been holding on to, all the hope that maybe he'd get better, it was gone too. That night, Grandma sat with me on the couch. She didn't say much, just held my hand. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like a kid again. A scared, lost kid who didn't know what the future held. After Grandpa passed, everything felt strange. The house was too quiet, too empty. He had been sick for a while, but somehow we always hoped he'd come home again. When that didn't happen, I think both Grandma and I just felt kind of lost. It's not like we talked about it or anything, but the way we moved around the house, avoiding certain rooms, staying busy, it was obvious. I threw myself into work. I had graduated high school by then and had to put off college to help out at home. There was no way I was going to leave Grandma alone, especially not after everything she'd done for me. So, I found a full-time job at a local store. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and that's what we needed at the time. Grandma, though, she was the one I worried about. She didn't complain, she never did, but I could see how tired she was. She was still working her part-time jobs, even after everything, and I knew she felt guilty. One day I came home from work and found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of bills like they were about to jump up and bite her. I sat down across from her. "What's wrong?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. She just sighed and shook her head. "It's these bills, Jenny. We're managing, but barely. I'm just so tired." I didn't know what to say. I mean, I was tired too, but I wasn't going to say that. I had to step up. "Don't worry, Grandma. I'm working full-time now, remember? We'll get through this." She gave me a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're too young to be worrying about bills. This isn't the life I wanted for you." That hit me hard. I could tell she felt guilty, like she'd somehow failed me, but I didn't see it that way. She and Grandpa had raised me, given me everything they could, and now it was my turn to help. I wasn't going to let her carry all that guilt. "Grandma, you did everything for me. I wouldn't be where I am without you and Grandpa. Don't think for a second this is your fault." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. After that, I made it my mission to work harder, take on more shifts, do whatever I could to make sure she didn't have to worry so much. It wasn't easy, but it was what I had to do. A few months went by, and things started to settle into a routine. Work, bills, sleep, repeat. It wasn't much of a life, but it was ours. Then one day, out of nowhere, we got a phone call. It was weird because nobody ever called us. I answered, and on the other end was this woman I didn't recognize. "Hello, is this Jennifer?" she asked. "Yeah, who's this?" There was a pause, and then she said, I'm your father's wife." My stomach dropped. My father? I hadn't heard from him in, what, 20 years? And now all of a sudden his wife was calling me? I didn't even know he was married. "Okay," I said slowly, not sure what to expect. "I'm sorry to tell you this, but your father passed away in a car accident." I didn't feel anything. I mean, what was I supposed to feel? The guy had abandoned me when I was a kid, and now I was supposed to care that he was dead? "I see," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She kept talking, but I barely listened. Something about the accident, the funeral, blah blah. It wasn't until she said something about inheritance that I snapped back to attention. "Inheritance?" I repeated. "Yes," she said, and I could hear the tension in her voice. "He left behind some assets, and as his biological child, you have a claim to them. Now I was confused. This man hadn't been in my life for years, and suddenly I was entitled to his money? It didn't feel real. I didn't even want anything from him. Why would I? But then she said something that really rubbed me the wrong way. Would you consider giving up your inheritance rights? It would make things easier for us. I mean, for me. We don't have any kids, and your claim complicates things. I couldn't believe it. She didn't even try to hide what this was about. It wasn't about my father's memory or closure or anything like that. It was about money. And not for me, but for her. She wanted me to just walk away, pretend like I didn't exist so she could have it all to herself. No, I said firmly. There was a pause. No? That's right, I said, my voice stronger now. I'm not giving up anything. I didn't even know about this inheritance. But now that I do, I'm not just going to give it up because it's convenient for you. She didn't like that answer. But you didn't even have a relationship with him. What difference does it make to you? That hit a nerve. You're right, I said. I didn't have a relationship with him. He left me with my grandparents and disappeared. But that doesn't mean I don't deserve what's rightfully mine. I could hear her fuming on the other end of the line. This isn't fair, she muttered. I don't care if it's fair to you, I snapped. He was my father, whether he acted like it or not, and I have a right to whatever he left behind. She hung up after that. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. I hadn't thought about my father in years. And now, all of a sudden, his death was bringing all this drama into my life. I told Grandma about the call, and she wasn't surprised. I always knew your father was selfish, she said. But this, trying to take everything for herself, that's low, even for him. We decided to consult a lawyer, just to make sure we knew what we were getting into. I wasn't sure how much money we were talking about, but it didn't matter. I wasn't going to back down. Not after everything we'd been through. I wasn't about to let some stranger, someone who didn't even know me, take away something that, for once, was supposed to be mine. After the phone call with my dad's wife, things escalated fast. It wasn't just about my inheritance claim anymore. It became this weird battle between me, someone who hadn't even seen her father in over 2 decades, and his second wife, who clearly wanted everything for herself. I wasn't trying to be greedy, but the way she came at me, demanding I give up my rights without even a proper conversation, rubbed me the wrong way. So, I dug my heels in. The first thing I did after talking to Grandma was call the family lawyer. He was actually a cousin of ours, and I'd only met him a few times growing up, but Grandma swore by him. She called him a straight shooter, which basically meant he didn't mess around with nonsense. I liked that. I didn't want drama. I just wanted to know what my rights were and where I stood in all of this. I sat down with him a few days later, and he went through everything with me. My dad had left behind a decent amount of assets, some savings, property, a few investments here and there. It wasn't like he was rolling in it, but it was more than I expected from someone who had basically ghosted me for most of my life. The part that got me was how much of this was a surprise. I knew nothing about his life after he left. The lawyer said the second wife had been living pretty well, and now that my dad was gone, she wanted to hold on to everything. So, what do? I asked the lawyer, sitting in his stuffy office, feeling a little out of place. I didn't know anything about legal stuff, especially something like inheritance. I mean, this wasn't exactly something we learned about in school. Well, he said, adjusting his glasses and looking through some papers, you have a claim to half of your father's assets. As his biological child, you're entitled to that, unless you choose to waive your rights. I shook my head. I'm not waiving anything. He smiled a little. I didn't think so, but the other side, meaning your father's wife, is likely to contest it. This could get messy. I didn't really care if it got messy. I wasn't going to let her bully me out of what was mine. But I had to think of Grandma too. She was still recovering from everything with Grandpa, and I didn't want to drag her into some legal battle. But when I talked to her about it, she was all for me standing my ground. You deserve this, Jenny, she said firmly. After everything you've been through, don't let that woman take what's yours. So that was it. We were in. The lawyer filed the necessary paperwork, and it wasn't long before the second wife's lawyer got in touch with mine. Apparently, she wasn't happy about me staking a claim and was prepared to fight. I tried not to think too much about it, but it was hard. I'd come home from work every day wondering if there'd be another call, another piece of paperwork, something else to deal with. It started to consume a lot of my time, which I guess is what legal stuff does. Then one day, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and Grandma was out running errands. I opened the door, and there she was, my dad's wife standing right on my doorstep. Can we talk? She asked, looking all stressed out, like this whole situation was wearing her down. I didn't really want to, but I figured I'd hear her out. All right, I said, stepping aside so she could come in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Grandma and I had talked about everything just weeks before. It felt weird, like I was letting the enemy into my house, but I was curious about what she had to say. I know this must be strange for you, she started, fidgeting with her hands. You didn't have a relationship with your father, so why are you pushing this? Her tone wasn't aggressive, but it was clear she was trying to guilt me into backing down. I wasn't having it. I didn't have a relationship with him because he left me, I said, keeping my voice steady. But that doesn't mean I don't have a right to what he left behind, she sighed. But I was his wife. I was there for him when no one else was. I'm not saying you don't deserve something, I replied. But I'm his daughter, and I'm not giving up my rights just because it's inconvenient for you. Her face tightened. Inconvenient? You have no idea what this has been like for me. Losing him, dealing with all of this, and now this inheritance battle. You don't even need the money. I felt my blood boil a little at that. How did she know what I needed? She didn't know my life, didn't know the struggles Grandma and I had gone through. You don't know what I need, I said firmly. This isn't just about the money, it's about what's fair. She didn't like that answer, but she didn't push back as hard as I thought she would. Instead, she just looked tired. I just want this to be over, she muttered. Well, it'll be over when we settle this properly, I said, not backing down. I'm not giving in just to make things easier for you. There was a long silence after that. She stared down at the table, and I could tell she was trying to figure out what to say next. But whatever she was thinking, she kept it to herself. After a few more minutes of awkward silence, she stood up. I hope you reconsider, she said, her voice flat, like she knew I wouldn't. I didn't say anything as she left, just watched her walk out the door, feeling this weird mix of anger and confusion. I didn't want to fight with her, but I wasn't going to let her push me around either. When Grandma got home later, I told her about the visit. She just shook her head. She's desperate, Grandma said, but don't let that change your mind. You're doing the right thing. I hope she was right. I didn't like how things were playing out, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let anyone take advantage of me. Not now, not ever again. So after the visit from my dad's wife, things got even more complicated. The legal stuff was already in motion, and I knew we weren't backing down. I didn't hear from her again directly, but my lawyer sure did. He started getting all these aggressive letters from her side, trying to push for a quick settlement, basically trying to get me to give up. But I wasn't budging. The thing is, this whole situation had started to wear on me. I wasn't sleeping great, and every time the phone rang, I'd get this knot in my stomach, worried it was more drama about the inheritance. Grandma kept telling me to stay strong, but I could tell she was getting tired too. We didn't have the luxury to ignore it. Every day felt like there was a new letter, a new request from their lawyer trying to get me to give up, and I was starting to feel like I was stuck in a never-ending battle. Then, out of nowhere, my lawyer called me one afternoon while I was at work. We've got a problem, he said, his voice all tense. I immediately felt my stomach drop. What now? I asked, already bracing for the worst. She's contesting your claim, he explained. She's saying that your father didn't want you to get anything, that he specifically wanted it all to go to her. I was stunned. What? How can she say that? There's no will that says that, right? He sighed. Right, but she's claiming that was his intent, that he just never got around to putting it in writing. I couldn't believe it. It felt like every time I thought things were starting to settle, they found a new way to stir it all up again. So what do we do now? I asked, feeling more frustrated than anything. We fight it, he said simply. She can claim whatever she wants, but unless she's got solid proof, it's not going to hold up in court. It's a scare tactic, plain and simple. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I knew he was right, but it didn't make it any easier to deal with. Every step of this process was just dragging out, making everything more exhausting. Weeks passed, and we kept going back and forth with their lawyers. At one point, they even tried to say I wasn't really his daughter. Yeah, seriously. They were that desperate to get me out of the picture. I couldn't believe the lengths they were going to just to keep me from getting what was mine. I remember sitting down with Grandma one night, feeling completely drained. I don't even know why I'm doing this anymore, I told her, slumping down on the couch. Grandma gave me this look like she knew exactly how I was feeling. You're doing this because it's the right thing, she said, her voice firm. Don't let them bully you out of what's yours. Your father might not have been in your life, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve your share. She was right, but it was hard to keep that in mind when it felt like the fight was never going to end. Still, I kept going. We filed responses, showed up to meetings, and basically just kept pushing forward. Then, one day, I got a call from my lawyer that changed everything. They're offering a settlement, he said, his tone surprised. A settlement? I repeated, not quite believing it. What kind of settlement? They're offering to split everything 50-50, no further contest, he explained. They'll drop all their claims, and you'll get half of the estate. I sat there, stunned. After all the fighting, all the back and forth, they were finally willing to settle. I didn't know what to say at first. Part of me felt like maybe I should have kept pushing. Maybe I should have held out for more. But the other part of me was just relieved that this might finally be over. What do you think? I asked him. I think it's a fair offer, he said. It's what you were entitled to from the start, and it's better than dragging this through court for another year. I nodded. Okay, let's take it. When I told Grandma about the settlement, she looked relieved too. I'm proud of you, she said, smiling at me. You stood your ground. That's what matters. And just like that, it was over. The paperwork was filed, and within a few weeks, the estate was officially divided. I didn't feel the rush of victory or triumph that I thought I might. It was more like this quiet relief, like a weight I'd been carrying around for months had finally been lifted. We got our share, and it was enough to take care of the bills, put some savings away, and finally let Grandma retire from all those part-time jobs she'd been working. That was the best part of all of this. She didn't have to struggle anymore, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like things were going to be okay. I thought a lot about my dad after everything was settled. Part of me still couldn't believe how things had played out. He wasn't a part of my life, hadn't been there for me or Grandma, but in the end, he'd left something behind. Maybe it wasn't intentional. Maybe he never meant for me to get anything, but it didn't really matter anymore. I had my life, and I had my family, my real family, the ones who had always been there for me. When I looked at Grandma, finally resting after years of hard work, I knew we had made the right choice. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about standing up for ourselves and not letting anyone take advantage of us. My dad's wife might have wanted it all, but in the end, we got what we deserved. And that was enough for me. Update. It's funny how things change after everything calms down. After all the drama with the inheritance was finally over, life kind of just moved on. I thought I'd feel different, like I'd have this big moment where I'd finally be able to relax and breathe. And I did sort of, but not in the way I expected. After we got our share of the inheritance, I focused on making sure Grandma was taken care of. That was always the goal, really. I wanted her to be comfortable, to not have to worry about money or bills or any of that anymore. She'd worked so hard her whole life, especially after Grandpa got sick, and now she didn't have to anymore. That alone made all the stress and fights worth it. But honestly, once everything settled, I found myself feeling kind of empty. It's weird, right? I'd spent so much time fighting, pushing through all the lawyer stuff, and thinking about my dad and his wife that when it was all done, I didn't really know what to do with myself. I guess part of me had always been waiting for some kind of closure, like maybe I'd get some answers about why my dad left or what his life had been like after he disappeared. But none of that ever came. There was no big revelation, no final piece of the puzzle that made everything make sense. He was just gone. And that was that. One day, Grandma and I were sitting on the porch, just watching the sun go down. It was one of those quiet moments where neither of us said much, but I knew we were both thinking about everything that had happened. You did good, Jenny, she said out of nowhere, her voice soft but firm. I looked over at her and smiled. Thanks, Grandma. She nodded and then said something I didn't expect. It's time for you to start thinking about yourself now. You've been taking care of everyone else for so long, but you've got a whole life ahead of you. I didn't really know what to say to that. She was right, of course. I had spent so much time worrying about everyone else, I hadn't really stopped to think about what I wanted. But now, for the first time, I felt like maybe I could. Story 2. Ex-wife left me for her new hubby, but I level up while they struggle and can't afford their lifestyle. So, me and Lisa, my ex-wife, split up like 13 years ago, right? At first, things were pretty rough, but we figured out how to handle custody of our kids, Mia and Jake. Mia's almost an adult now, and Jake's in his teenage years. We've got this 50-50th custody thing going on, which honestly works out fine most of the time. No child support needed because we both spend the same amount of time with the kids and we split all their costs down the middle. School fees, medical bills, sports, all that. It's fair, right? Now here's the thing. I've been saving for these kids from day one. When Mia was born, I opened an account for her. Same with Jake when he came along. Every little bit I could save went into those accounts. I knew I couldn't always rely on everything being smooth between me and Lisa, So I wanted to make sure the kids were set for the future, no matter what. But then, something happened. About 8 years ago, I got hurt at work. Nothing too crazy, but bad enough that I had to take some time off and got a settlement. Wasn't $1 million or anything, but it was enough to make a difference. And the first thing I thought, this is going straight into Mia and Jake's future. So I put a nice chunk of that settlement into their accounts. That wasn't the end of it either. About 4 years ago, I had this aunt. Didn't know her super well, but apparently she thought highly of me. She passed away and left me a bit of cash in her will. Again, not a fortune, but enough that I could make sure the kids wouldn't have to stress about college, or whatever else they wanted to do when they grew up. So yeah, I put that money in their accounts too. With all of that, they're sitting pretty good. If they decide to go to college or not, they'll have some options, you know? Anyway, while all this was happening, Lisa had moved on. She's remarried now to a guy named Dave. Dave's got his own situation. He's got a teenage stepdaughter from a previous relationship, a nephew they're raising, and he and Lisa had 2 more kids together. So, they've got a house full of kids. And I guess money's tighter than they expected. One day, Lisa hits me up and says we need to talk about college for Mia and Jake. I figured, okay, makes sense. I mean, we're getting to that point where we need to start thinking seriously about their future. So, we meet up, and she starts talking about how she and Dave sat all their kids down to tell them that community college is the most affordable option. They're going to help out as much as they can, but anything more than that is just too expensive. I just sit there, listening, waiting for the part where she gets to the point. And then she hits me with, but you know, we could probably help Mia and Jake a little more, right? That's when I let her know. Actually, I've been saving for them. There's enough in their accounts to give them some real choices. The look on her face, priceless. She's all, wait, what? Why didn't you tell me this before? And I'm thinking, why would I need to? But I told her straight up, I've been taking care of our kids. It's not something you needed to know. She didn't like that answer, but hey, it's the truth. I've always handled what I need to handle for them, and I didn't see the point in telling her when it didn't affect her. Now, this is where things start to get weird. A few days later, she calls me again. Only this time, Dave's on the phone too, and I'm thinking, uh-oh, what's this about? Lisa starts off by saying how they've been thinking about the whole college thing and how tight money is for them right now. Then she drops the bomb. We were hoping you could start paying child support again, just for the next few years, so we can save more for the other kids. I'm sorry, what? At first, I wasn't sure if I heard her right. Child support? For our kids? Who we already split time and expenses for equally. So they can save for their other kids? I told them, no way, that's not happening. I'm not paying child support so they can save money for Dave's kids. But then, get this, Dave chimes in. This guy barely knows me, right? But he's suddenly trying to act like we're all one big happy family. He says, you know, you could always split the money you've saved for Mia and Jake with the other kids. That way they all get a fair shot. A fair shot? Are you kidding me? I looked at my phone like it had grown another head. I told them, flat out, that's not happening. I'm not paying for your kids to go to college. The money I've saved is for Mia and Jake, and that's where it's staying. Lisa goes quiet for a second, and I think maybe she's finally getting it. But no, she starts telling me how I'm being cruel, how I'm making things harder on their whole family, and how this should be a no-brainer for me. At this point, I'd had enough. I told her, look, the only way I'd be responsible for your whole household is if we never broke up. But guess what? We did. So you're going to have to accept that you're equally responsible for Mia and Jake, just like me. Now, I'm not going to lie. Part of me felt like maybe I was being too harsh. But seriously, what do they expect me to do? I'm just trying to take care of my kids. I've been doing that since day one. And I'm not about to let someone else's family become my responsibility. If they're having money problems, that's on them. I've got my own kids to worry about. After that, they both started calling me every name under the sun. You're selfish, you're cruel, you don't care about family, all that nonsense. But I stood my ground. At the end of the day, I'm not here to fund their entire household. I'll always do what's right for my kids, but that's where the line gets drawn. So now I'm sitting here thinking, am I the bad guy for refusing to help their other kids? Or is this just another case of people trying to take advantage? Honestly, I don't know. But I do know one thing. Mia and Jake are my priority, and I'm not about to let anyone guilt me into doing something that's not my responsibility. All right, so after that insane phone call with Lisa and Dave, I figured things would cool down, right? I mean, I said my piece. I wasn't going to pay for their other kids, and that should have been the end of it. But nah, of course it wasn't. Things never really end that easily, do they? About a week later, I'm just minding my business when I get a text from Lisa. She's asking if we can sit down and have a serious discussion about the kids. At this point, I'm thinking, what now? But I agreed because, co-parenting and all that. I figured it'd be some normal stuff like schedules or school or something. We meet up at this coffee shop and she's got that look. You know the one. Like she's gearing up for something. She doesn't even bother with small talk and jumps straight into it. So I've been talking to Mia, she says. I'm immediately like, oh great, what now? Apparently, Lisa's been trying to guilt trip our daughter into thinking about her step-siblings' futures. She starts going on about how Mia should consider sharing some of her college money with Dave's kids. I couldn't believe it. She's only 17, I told Lisa. Why are you putting that kind of pressure on her? Lisa, acting all innocent, goes, I'm just trying to teach her about family. It's important for her to learn how to share, how to help others. I looked at her like she had 3 heads. Teach her about family? Are you kidding me? This isn't about sharing toys, Lisa. We're talking about her future. You can't just guilt her into giving up her money for kids that aren't even hers. She tries to spin it like I'm the bad guy. You're just making things worse by being so stubborn about this. I'm only trying to prepare her for the real world where people have to make sacrifices. I had to sit back for a second. The real world? Sacrifices? Look, I'm all for teaching kids life lessons, but not like this. Not when it comes to their future, their education, their chances to succeed. You're the one putting unnecessary stress on her, I told Lisa. She doesn't need to worry about Dave's kids' college funds. That's not her responsibility, and you know it. Lisa starts getting all huffy, saying I'm being unreasonable, that I should see things from her perspective. But here's the thing. Her perspective is entirely selfish. She's just trying to find a way to take advantage of the situation because she and Dave can't manage their own finances. I finally cut her off and said, look, if you need more money so bad, maybe you and Dave should look at your own spending habits instead of trying to dig into Mia and Jake's future. And that's when she really lost it. She starts talking about how hard it is for them, how they're struggling to make ends meet with all the kids in the house. And I get it. Raising kids isn't cheap, especially when you've got as many as they do. But at the end of the day, that's their problem, not mine. And definitely not our kids' problem. I wasn't having it. You're not struggling enough to give up your fancy vacations or your shopping sprees, though, are you? I asked her. Probably a little harsher than I meant to. But seriously, it's the truth. Every time I see them, they're talking about some new trip they're planning or Dave's latest gadget or whatever. She just glared at me, obviously pissed. You wouldn't understand, she said, like I'm some kind of alien who's never dealt with a budget before. Yeah, well, Mia and Jake don't need to understand it either, I said. They don't owe you or Dave anything, and if you keep trying to mess with their heads about this, we're going to have a real problem. She stormed out after that, but I didn't care. I knew I'd made my point, or at least I hoped I did. But here's where it gets worse. I figured Lisa would leave it alone after our talk, but of course, she didn't. A few days later, Mia comes home looking all stressed out. I ask her what's going on, and she tells me that her mom's been going on and on about how unfair it is that her step-siblings won't get the same college opportunities. Now, Mia's a smart kid. She's not easily swayed, but I could tell it was starting to weigh on her. She says, Mom keeps saying that since you saved so much for us, it's only fair that we help out a little. I was fuming. Like, how could Lisa put this on her? How could she make her own daughter feel bad about having something her step-siblings don't? That's not Mia's fault, and it's definitely not her job to fix it. Mia, I told her, listen to me. The money I've saved for you is yours and Jake's. That's it. Your mom and Dave are responsible for their own kids. You don't have to feel guilty about it. She nodded, but I could tell it still bothered her, and that just pissed me off even more. How dare Lisa try to manipulate her like that? She's a teenager, for crying out loud. She should be worrying about her future, not about how to fund her step-siblings' college dreams. After that, I made it clear to Mia that if her mom brought it up again, she should just tell her to talk to me. I wasn't about to let Lisa dump her financial problems onto our daughter. But still, I could see the damage was done. Mia's a good kid, too good sometimes. She's always trying to do the right thing, always trying to make everyone happy. And it kills me that her mom's taking advantage of that. I ended up texting Lisa that night, telling her to back off. I wasn't playing nice anymore. I told her if she keeps pushing this, I'll take the kids full time if that's what it takes to keep her from messing with their heads. I didn't get a reply, but honestly, I didn't need one. She knows I mean business. And yeah, maybe that was harsh. Maybe it'll cause more tension down the line. But I don't care. I'll do whatever it takes to protect Mia and Jake from getting dragged into their mom's mess. This is about their future, and I'm not letting anyone, not even their own mom, jeopardize that. So yeah, that's where things stand right now. Lisa's still trying to play her little games, but I'm not budging. I've got my kids' backs, and I'm ready for whatever's next. Update 1. All right, so after all that nonsense with Lisa trying to guilt trip Mia into sharing her college money, I thought things might finally calm down. But nope, not even close. Turns out, that was just the beginning of the chaos. A couple of weeks go by, and I get a call from Jake's school. I'm thinking it's one of those regular check-ins. Maybe something about grades or sports. But it's not. The school counselor wants to talk to me because Jake's been acting out. Now, if you know Jake, you know he's a pretty laid-back kid, not one to cause trouble. So I'm immediately concerned. I go in to meet with the counselor, and she tells me that Jake's been getting into arguments with other kids, his grades are slipping, and he's been withdrawn lately. Naturally, my first thought is that something's going on with him, and maybe he's not telling me. So I sit him down later that day and ask him what's up. At first, Jake brushes it off, saying it's nothing, just normal school stress. But I know my kid, and I can tell something's eating at him. After a little more pushing, he finally opens up. Dad, it's just, I don't know how to handle it when I'm at Mom's house anymore, he says. What do you mean? I ask. Well, it's like every time we're over there, Mom and Dave are always talking about money, about how they don't have enough for all the kids and how it's not fair that me and Mia have everything set. That hit me like a ton of bricks. I knew Lisa was pulling that crap with Mia, but hearing that Jake's been hearing this same junk too, that's a whole other level of messed up. Apparently, whenever Jake's at his mom's, he's constantly overhearing these conversations about how unfair it is that they're struggling with 4 kids and how lucky he and Mia are because of the money I saved for them. And not only that, but Dave's been making little comments around him, stuff like, must be nice to have a rich dad, or guess you don't need to worry about your future like the rest of us. Are you kidding me? I asked Jake why he didn't tell me sooner, and he just shrugs, saying he didn't want to make a big deal out of it. He's a good kid, you know? Doesn't like stirring up trouble, but I could tell it's been weighing on him. And now it's affecting him at school. At that point, I was done with being polite. I called Lisa as soon as Jake went to his room and let her know exactly what I thought about the crap they'd been pulling. I told her to knock it off with the guilt tripping, or I'd take it to court if I had to. I was not about to let her and Dave mess with our son's head just because they couldn't handle their own situation. Of course, Lisa tried to defend herself, saying, we're not trying to guilt trip him. We're just being open about our struggles. I told her flat out, there's a difference between being honest and making a kid feel bad for something that's completely out of his control. Jake's been stressing about stuff he shouldn't even have to think about. She tried to play it off like it wasn't a big deal, but I wasn't having it. I told her this was her last warning. Either stop putting this pressure on the kids or I'd get the courts involved. It's not ideal, but I'll do whatever it takes to protect my kids. After I hung up, I decided to sit down with Jake again and let him know that none of this was his fault. I told him, look, what's going on at your mom's? That's not on you. It's on her and Dave to figure out their own situation, and you don't need to worry about it. He just nodded, but I could tell he was relieved. Still, I knew this wasn't going to be something that'd magically fix itself overnight. The next part of this whole mess came a few days later when Mia, Jake, and I were hanging out. Mia had just gotten home from seeing her mom, and she seemed off. I asked her what was up, and she said, Mom keeps bringing up this idea about sharing the money again. It's like she won't drop it. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. Lisa hadn't learned anything from our last conversation, clearly. But before I could even say anything, Mia looks at me and goes, but I told her it's not happening. She got all mad, but I don't care. I know what's right. I was so proud of her in that moment. I mean, this is a kid who's had to deal with so much pressure from her own mother, and she's still standing her ground. I couldn't help but give her a hug and tell her how proud I was. After that, I figured things might die down. But nope, Lisa wasn't done causing problems. One night, Jake gets a text from his mom while we're having dinner. He shows it to me, and it's her asking if he'd be willing to help out with the younger kids' school expenses. Seriously? She's now texting our son directly, asking him to chip in for stuff that's her responsibility. I grabbed Jake's phone and texted back myself. If you need help, talk to me. Don't involve Jake in this. Lisa didn't respond, but I didn't need her to. I made it crystal clear that the kids are not her solution to her financial problems. Here's the thing. Being a parent is tough. I get that. But it's not the kids' job to fix the mess the adults have created. I've saved for Mia and Jake because I wanted to give them a good future, not because I thought it'd turn into this weird guilt contest. At the end of the day, I know my kids. They're good people, and they shouldn't have to deal with this kind of crap. It's on me to shield them from it, and that's exactly what I'm going to keep doing. Now, I've been thinking about my next steps. I don't want to go through the courts unless I absolutely have to, but if Lisa keeps pulling this nonsense, I'll do it. I'm not going to let her and Dave guilt trip our kids anymore. It's not fair and it's not right. So, yeah, that's where things are now. I'm keeping a close eye on everything, making sure Jake and Mia know that they don't owe anyone anything. They deserve to have a future that's theirs, free from all this drama. And if I have to keep fighting for that, I will. Update 2. All right, so after everything with Lisa trying to drag Mia and Jake into her financial mess, I thought, okay, this has got to be it. Like, how much more could she possibly try? But clearly I underestimated just how far she was willing to push things. About a week or so after the whole thing with Jake's school and Mia standing her ground, I get a call. This time it's from Dave. Yeah, Dave. I was already on edge before I even picked up the phone. Like, what the hell could he possibly want now? He starts off trying to be all casual, which was honestly weird. He's like, hey man, how's it going? And I'm sitting there thinking, just get to the point, dude. Then he says, listen, I wanted to talk to you about something. I know things have been tense between you and Lisa lately, and I get it, but I think we can work something out. I'm just quiet, waiting for whatever BS he's about to lay on me. And then he hits me with, look, we're really struggling over here. With 4 kids, it's hard, and I was thinking, maybe we could come to an agreement where you help out a little more. You know, for the good of the family. I had to take a second because honestly, I thought I'd misheard him. For the good of the family? What family? The only family I'm responsible for is Mia and Jake. That's it. I calmly told him, Dave, I've been more than fair. I've saved for my kids' future, and I'm doing my part. I'm not about to start paying for your kids. That's on you and Lisa. But then Dave starts getting defensive, talking about how it's all about the kids, and how I should think of it like I'm helping out a bigger family unit. At this point, I'm losing my patience, but I keep it together and just say, my responsibility starts and ends with Mia and Jake. That's it. I'm not going to change that because you're having trouble making ends meet. And that's when things start getting ugly. He starts raising his voice, saying how selfish I'm being, how I don't care about the fact that my kids' siblings are struggling. He even tried to throw in some guilt trip about how it's affecting his kids' self-esteem, knowing that Mia and Jake have money for college while they don't. I wasn't having it. I cut him off and said, look, Dave, I don't know how else to say this, but your kids are not my responsibility. I've done everything I need to do for my own kids, and I'm not going to feel guilty because you and Lisa are struggling. That's your issue to figure out, not mine. Dave wasn't happy with that answer, obviously. He starts going off saying how unfair I'm being, how I'm making things harder on their whole family. I could hear Lisa in the background trying to calm him down, but he was on a roll now. Finally, I just told him, if you guys need more help, then maybe you should stop spending so much on things you don't need. I see the vacations, I see the shopping. You can't come to me and ask for money when you're living like that. That's when Dave really lost it. He starts accusing me of being nosy, saying I have no right to judge how they spend their money. And sure, maybe I don't. But when they're coming to me, asking me to chip in for their kids, yeah, I think I have every right to point out the obvious. He ended up hanging up on me, which, to be honest, was a relief. I was done with the conversation anyway, but the thing that really pissed me off, the fact that he even thought it was okay to call me and ask for more money in the first place. Like, how many times do I have to say it? My kids are my priority, and that's where my money's going. But here's where it gets even crazier. The next day, I'm at work, and I get a text from Mia. She's like, Dad, can we talk when you get home? Something happened with Mom. Immediately, I'm worried. Mia doesn't usually send messages like that unless something's seriously bothering her. So I get home that night, and she's waiting for me in the kitchen. I can tell she's upset, and she starts telling me about this huge argument she had with Lisa. Apparently, Lisa had brought up the whole sharing the college fund thing again. But this time she wasn't just talking about it, she was demanding it. She told Mia that it was time for her to step up and be a real part of the family by agreeing to split her college money with her step-siblings. Mia, being the strong kid she is, stood her ground again and told her mom that it wasn't happening. And that's when Lisa really went off. She accused Mia of being selfish, of not caring about her family, and even tried to tell her that I was the one who had brainwashed her into being so cold-hearted. Brainwashed? Are you serious? Mia was in tears by the end of it, and I don't blame her. It's bad enough that her mom keeps bringing this up, but now she's making it a personal attack. I was furious. I've always tried to keep things civil between me and Lisa for the sake of the kids, but this was crossing a line. I called Lisa that night. I didn't yell, didn't lose my temper, but I made it very clear that this crap needed to stop. I told her, this isn't a negotiation. Mia's money is her money. If you bring this up again, I'll take legal action if I have to. Lisa tried to backtrack, saying she didn't mean to upset Mia, but I wasn't buying it. I told her, This is the last time I'm having this conversation. Keep Mia and Jake out of your financial problems, or we'll handle this through the courts. She finally shut up after that, but I could tell she was pissed. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. My priority is protecting my kids, and I wasn't going to let her guilt them into feeling responsible for something that isn't their problem. So yeah, things are tense, to say the least. But I'm done playing nice. Lisa and Dave can figure out their own mess. My kids are going to have their futures secured, and that's all that matters to me. Update 3. Alright, so here's where everything really hits the fan. After all the craziness with Lisa trying to guilt trip Mia and Jake, and Dave's ridiculous phone call asking me to help out financially, I thought things had finally settled down. But of course, that was just wishful thinking on my part. A couple of weeks go by, and I get an email. It's from a lawyer. Yeah, you read that right. Lisa hired a lawyer. At first, I'm thinking, what the hell is this about? So I open the email, and right there, it's a formal notice that Lisa is filing for child support. She's claiming that our 50/50ths arrangement isn't working anymore and that she's the primary caregiver for the kids, which means I should be paying her child support to help with their expenses. I couldn't believe it. We've had the same 50/50th split for years, and suddenly she's saying it's not working? And the nerve to try to say she's the primary caregiver? I've been there for every school event, every doctor's appointment, every single thing. And now she's going to try to pull this? I called up my lawyer immediately. We go over the whole situation and I explain everything, how we split everything evenly, how the kids are with me half the time, and how I've been saving for their future all along. My lawyer says it sounds like Lisa's just trying to use the system to get more money out of me, which, let's be honest, isn't a shock at this point. But here's where it gets even more messed up. As part of her case, Lisa's claiming that she and Dave are financially struggling because they have to support all their kids, and that I need to help out since Mia and Jake are part of that household. I was floored. She's actually trying to legally argue that I should be responsible for helping her and Dave raise their other kids. I mean, seriously, how do you even get the audacity to make that kind of argument in court? Anyway, my lawyer wasn't having it. We put together a solid defense, pointing out that I've been more than fair when it comes to supporting Mia and Jake. And not only that, but I also submitted records showing how much I've saved for the kids' future, just to prove that I've been doing my part, and then some. We get a court date set, and let me tell you, I was ready for this. I'd had enough of Lisa's games. If she wanted to take this to court, fine. I was prepared. The day of the hearing comes, and I walk into that courtroom with all my paperwork, feeling confident. Lisa and Dave are already there, and I can tell by the look on their faces that they're still convinced they're going to win this. It's almost funny, honestly, because they have no idea what's coming. The hearing starts, and Lisa's lawyer gets up there, talking about how unfair it is that Lisa and Dave are struggling while I'm sitting on all this money. They go on and on about how hard it is for them to support 4 kids, and how the court should order me to pay child support to level the playing field. I'm sitting there, just shaking my head. When it's my turn, my lawyer absolutely dismantles their argument. She points out that our custody arrangement has been 50/50ths for years, and that Lisa's only bringing this up now because she and Dave can't manage their finances. She also drops the bombshell that Lisa and Dave have been trying to get Mia and Jake to share their college money with the other kids, which really got the judge's attention. Then my lawyer lays out all the proof. Bank statements showing how I've saved for the kids, the fact that I've been an active and involved parent the whole time, and how Lisa's just trying to squeeze more money out of me for her other kids. The judge listens to all of it and then turns to Lisa's lawyer. And let me tell you, the look on Lisa's face at that moment was priceless. The judge pretty much shut down every argument they made. He said that our 50/50ths arrangement was working perfectly fine and that there was no reason to change it. He also made it very clear that I was only responsible for my kids and that Lisa and Dave's financial struggles were their own problem to solve. When the judge ruled in my favor, I could see Lisa was furious. She didn't say a word to me, but I knew she was livid. Dave, too. They just stormed out of the courtroom like they couldn't believe what had just happened. And honestly, I felt a huge sense of relief. I wasn't trying to be petty, but I'd had enough of being dragged into their financial drama. I was just glad that the judge saw through all the BS and ruled in a way that was fair to Mia, Jake, and me. But here's the kicker. After the court case, things got really quiet from Lisa's side. No more guilt tripping, no more ridiculous requests for money. It's like they finally realized that I wasn't going to cave no matter how much they pushed. And honestly, that's all I ever wanted. Just for them to back off and let me take care of my kids without all this unnecessary drama. So, yeah, that's pretty much where things are now. I'm still focused on making sure Mia and Jake have everything they need, and I'm not letting Lisa and Dave's problems get in the way of that. The whole court thing was a mess, but in the end, I'm just glad it's over. and I can finally move on without having to constantly look over my shoulder for whatever nonsense they're going to try next. Mia and Jake are doing great, by the way. Mia's got her eyes set on college, and Jake's focusing more on school now that things have calmed down. And me? I'm just trying to be the best dad I can be, knowing that I did everything I could to protect their future. That's it. That's where the story ends, at least for now. I'm sure there'll be more challenges ahead, but after everything we've been through, I know we can handle it. Story 3. This story is titled, "Family Didn't Invite Me to Christmas Because It's No Place for Losers," my brother said. I clamily agreed and stopped funding his children and wife. Now he's going crazy. Hi everyone. Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and make sure you never miss out on amazing videos. All right, let's get started. Hey Reddit. This happened on Christmas last year, and honestly, not so long ago, this story had a closure. I, 33 male, had the whole thing planned out. Gifts wrapped, playlist ready, all that festive crap. I was actually excited for once because I thought, hey, maybe this year won't be a disaster. I pulled up to my brother's house around noon. Now I see why Christmas was hosted at his house. My car packed with gifts I spent weeks picking out. I got stuff for Mom, Dad, Brad, my brother, his wife Emma, and their kids. I even went overboard with extra presents for the kids because, they're just kids. They shouldn't have to deal with adult drama. Turns out I wasted my time. I knocked on the door, juggling 2 big-ass gift bags, and waited. Emma opened it, but instead of the usual warm, "Hey, come in," she gave me this weird, uncomfortable look. Before I could even say, "Merry Christmas," Brad pushed past her, leaning on the doorframe with this smug grin. "You're not welcome here, Luke," he said. I blinked, thinking I misheard him. "What?" "You heard me," he said, folding his arms. "This isn't a place for selfish people who only think about themselves. You're such a loser." Now I'm standing there, freezing my ass off, with gift bags cutting into my hands. And this is what I get? I looked at my mom for backup, but she just avoided eye contact. Dad was in the background, pretending to mess with something on the kitchen counter like he didn't know what was going on. I should have seen that as a red flag, but I was too stunned. "What the hell are you talking about?" I finally asked Brad. "You're too busy with your new apartment and living your little life to care about the rest of us," he said. "You're not pulling your weight anymore, and we're all sick of it." I was speechless. Not pulling my weight? Are you kidding me? I've been bailing Brad out of his messes for years. I paid for his rent when he almost got evicted. I covered his kids' school fees. Hell, I even helped with their damn car payments once. But now I'm selfish because I bought myself a place to live? Make it make sense. And the worst part? My parents just stood there. Mom looked like she wanted to say something but didn't. And Dad wouldn't even look at me. Brad, meanwhile, was eating this up, standing there with that smug look like he was the king of the damn house. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to beg to be let into Brad's house. Screw that. I dropped the bags right there on the porch, looked Brad dead in the eye, and said, "You know what? Fine. Enjoy your Christmas. Don't expect to hear from me again." Then I turned around, got in my car, and drove off. No yelling, no arguing, just done. But as I drove home, the anger started bubbling up. Not just at Brad. He's always been an entitled jerk. But at my parents, too. They stood there and let him treat me like garbage. They didn't defend me. Hell, they didn't even question him. It was like they'd already decided I was the bad guy. When I got home, I sat in the car for a while, just staring at the dashboard. The bags of gifts were still in the back seat, and seeing them made me even angrier. I spent weeks picking out thoughtful, personal gifts for each of them. And for what? To be told I'm not welcome because I dared to prioritize myself for once? The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't new. Brad had always been the golden boy. He could screw up, fail, or flat out mooch, and my parents would bend over backward to excuse him. Meanwhile, I was expected to be the responsible one, the successful one, and I didn't mind helping at first. I love my nieces and nephews, and I wanted to make sure they had what they needed. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about helping, and started being about expectations. Like, because I helped once, I was now obligated to do it forever. And buying an apartment? Apparently that was my crime. Never mind that I worked my ass off to save up for it while still supporting Brad's family. Never mind that it's a 1-bedroom in a not great part of town, because it's all I could afford. To them, it's proof that I'm selfish. By the time I got inside, I was seething. I grabbed a drink, sat on the couch, and thought about how to handle this. A part of me wanted to text my mom and demand an explanation. Another part wanted to drive back and shove the gifts down Brad's throat. But mostly, I just felt done. Like I'd reached my limit with all of them. I spent Christmas alone that year, and yeah, it sucked at first. I tried to distract myself with movies and takeout, but it wasn't the same. Still, by the end of the night, I felt okay, better even. For the first time in years, I wasn't stressing about Brad's bills or trying to keep my parents happy. I was just me. And you know what? That felt like a gift in itself. 2 days after Christmas, I was just starting to enjoy the peace and quiet. No texts from Brad, no guilt-tripping calls from Mom, no weird passive-aggressive messages from Emma. It was like I'd been given a break from a toxic job I didn't even know I'd signed up for. Then my phone buzzed with a message from Mom. "We need to talk. Please meet us." I stared at it for a while. A part of me wanted to delete it and keep going with my new, stress-free life. But another part, maybe the part that still wanted answers, decided to see what they had to say. So I agreed to meet them at a local diner. I showed up late on purpose. If they wanted to talk to me so badly, they could wait a little. When I got there, Mom was already sitting at a booth with Dad, both of them looking tense. The second I slid into the seat across from them, Mom started. "We didn't mean for things to get so out of hand," she said, her voice soft like that would magically make everything better. "Brad was just emotional." I raised an eyebrow. "Emotional? Is that what you call kicking me out of Christmas?" Dad sighed, rubbing his temple like this was exhausting for him. "Look, Luke, we didn't agree with everything Brad said, but you let him say it," I cut in. "You didn't stop him. You didn't defend me. You just stood there." That shut them up for a second. Mom fiddled with her coffee mug while Dad looked out the window, like he was hoping a tornado would sweep him away. Finally, Mom said, "It's not that simple." "Really?" I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Explain it to me then. Make it simple." Mom took a deep breath, like she was trying to gear up for a tough conversation. "It's just, you've changed, Luke. You bought that apartment, and it's like your priorities shifted. You used to be so supportive of the family, always helping out when Brad needed it. But now?" She trailed off, not finishing the sentence, but I got the point. "But now what?" I pressed. "I'm selfish because I finally did something for myself? Because I stopped handing over money every time Brad screws up?" Mom winced. "It's not about the money. It's always about the money," I shot back. "Brad's the one who made it about that. I've been helping him for years, and suddenly I'm the bad guy because I decided to keep some of my paycheck. Give me a break." Dad finally spoke up, his tone annoyingly calm, like he was trying to mediate. "We're not saying you're a bad guy, Luke, but Brad's had a rough couple of years. You know how hard it's been for him to keep a job." "Yeah, because he doesn't try to keep one," I snapped. "He hops from gig to gig, blows through whatever money he makes, and then comes crying to me. And you guys just let it happen." "That's not fair," Mom said, defensive now. "He's doing his best. He's got a family to take care of." "And whose fault is that?" I countered. "Not mine. He chose to have kids. He chose to get married. But somehow, I'm the one paying for it?" Mom's face flushed, and I could tell she was getting upset. "Families help each other, Luke. That's what we do." "No, that's what I do," I corrected her. "All I've ever done is help. I've bailed him out of more problems than I can count, and you've stood by and let him use me. Now you're mad because I finally said no?" "We're not mad," Dad said, but I could hear the edge in his voice. "We're disappointed. You've always been the responsible one, Luke. We thought you'd understand that Brad needs support right now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Support? He needs a reality check. You think I don't notice how you guys treat him like he's a saint while I'm just the wallet? You didn't even question him when he kicked me out of Christmas. You just went along with it." Mom started to say something, but I wasn't done. "And what about my apartment? Why is that such a big deal? I bought a place to live. Big whoop. It's not like I bought a mansion or something. But suddenly, I'm selfish because I spent my money on myself?" Mom sighed heavily, looking more annoyed than apologetic. "It's not about the apartment itself. It's about what it represents. You've always been there for us, for Brad. But now it feels like you're pulling away." I shook my head, laughing bitterly. "You know what? Maybe I am pulling away. Maybe I'm sick of being treated like I owe everyone something. I worked hard for that apartment. I earned it. And I'm not going to apologize for wanting something for myself." Dad tried to play peacemaker again. "We're not asking you to apologize, Luke. We just want you to understand that Brad's family is struggling, and they need your help." "No, they need your help," I shot back. "I've done more than enough for them. If you're so worried about Brad, you help him. I'm out." Mom's expression hardened, like she was finally tired of arguing. "Fine," she said quietly. "If that's how you feel." "It is," I said, standing up. "And I'm done feeling guilty about it. Enjoy your golden child." I tossed a few bucks on the table to cover my coffee and walked out without looking back. I didn't care if they called after me. I didn't care if they sat there stewing. I was done. After that talk with my parents, I was completely done. Like, There wasn't even a shred of doubt left in me. It's one thing to feel unappreciated. It's another to have your entire family gaslight you into thinking you're the problem. The way they kept twisting everything to make Brad look like the victim, it was maddening. I didn't even need to think about it anymore. I decided then and there that I wasn't just stepping back. I was cutting ties completely. That night, I sat down with my phone and wrote out a text. It wasn't long or emotional, just straight to the point. I'm done. Don't ask me for anything ever again. Then I hit send to the group chat with my parents, Brad and Emma, and immediately blocked all of them. I won't lie, it felt weird at first. Cutting off your family isn't exactly something you prepare for. There's this lingering voice in the back of your head that keeps asking, am I overreacting? Should I try harder to fix things? But every time I started second-guessing myself, I'd remember Christmas. I'd think about Brad, standing there with that smug look, my parents just silently agreeing with him, and all the crap they said during that diner talk. That shut the doubts up real quick. The first couple of days were quiet, which I was grateful for. No calls, no texts, no drama. For the first time in forever, I didn't have to worry about anyone dumping their problems on me. It was like I was finally getting my own life back. But of course, it didn't last. About a week later, I started hearing from mutual friends. Apparently, my parents were telling people I'd abandoned the family. They made it sound like I'd turned my back on them for no reason, like I was some heartless jerk who'd decided I was too good for them. Brad, of course, was leading the charge, playing the victim like he was auditioning for an Oscar. Can you believe Luke just walked away from his family, they'd say, after everything we've been through together? It's like he doesn't even care about us. Hearing that pissed me off, but it didn't surprise me. Brad's always been great at spinning stories to make himself look like the hero, or, in this case, the poor, misunderstood brother. What did surprise me was how quickly some people bought into it. A couple of friends reached out, basically asking what the hell was going on. Hey man, one of them, Jared, texted me. Your parents said you're not talking to them anymore? Something about you being upset over Christmas? What's up with that? I thought about ignoring it, but I figured I might as well set the record straight for the people who actually cared enough to ask. I called Jared back and explained the whole thing. Not just Christmas, but the years of being used, the constant guilt trips, the way my family always put Brad on a pedestal while treating me like an ATM. Dude, Jared said when I finished, that's messed up. I had no idea it was like that. Yeah, well, I said, trying to play it off. I guess I just finally hit my limit. Can't blame you, he said. If I were in your shoes, I'd probably do the same thing. That conversation made me feel a little better. Like maybe I wasn't the crazy one after all. But for every Jared, there were at least two other people who bought into my parents' sob story. I started seeing vague, passive-aggressive messages on Facebook from some of my extended family members. Stuff like, family should always come first, no matter what. Some people need to remember that. It was so obvious who they were talking about that it almost made me laugh. I thought about responding, maybe calling them out for not knowing the full story, but then I realized I didn't owe them anything. Let them believe whatever they wanted. At the end of the day, I wasn't going to waste my energy defending myself to people who never cared enough to ask for my side. Still, the whole thing got me thinking about how easy it had been for my family to turn on me. It wasn't like I'd been a bad son or a bad brother. If anything, I'd gone above and beyond for them. And yet, the second I decided to treat myself with the bare minimum, I was suddenly the villain. It's crazy how quickly people show their true colors when you stop giving them what they want. I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss the idea of family. There were moments when I'd see something funny or hear some news and instinctively think, oh, I should tell mom about this, only to remember that I wasn't talking to her anymore. It's not like I was some cold-hearted robot who didn't care, but I knew going back would just drag me into the same old cycle, and I wasn't willing to do that. What made it even harder was that I genuinely liked Emma and the kids. Emma had always been nice to me, and the kids were innocent in all of this. But at the same time, I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine just because of them. If Brad and my parents weren't willing to treat me with basic respect, there wasn't much point in sticking around. After a while, the noise started dying down. The Facebook messages stopped. The mutual friends stopped bringing it up, and I stopped hearing about what my family was saying behind my back. It was like they'd finally accepted that I wasn't coming back, which was a relief. A couple of weeks went by, and honestly, I thought I'd heard the last of my family drama. Cutting ties with them brought me the peace I desperately needed. I wasn't waking up to guilt-tripping texts from mom, I wasn't dealing with Brad's endless demands, and I wasn't carrying the weight of everyone else's problems. For the first time in forever, I felt free. Then, one random Tuesday afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I'd just let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. Hello? I said. Is this Luke? A serious voice on the other end asked. Yeah. Who's this? This is Brian, he said. I'm a lawyer representing Emma. Do you have a moment to discuss some legal matters involving your family? At first, I thought it was some kind of scam. Why would Emma need a lawyer, and what the hell did it have to do with me? Uh, yeah, sure, I said cautiously. What's going on? There was a brief pause before he dropped it. Emma has reason to believe that Brad has been engaging in illegal activities, and your financial transactions with him might be relevant to an ongoing investigation. I froze. Wait, what? What investigation? I haven't talked to Brad in weeks. I understand, Brian said, his tone calm and professional. But Emma recently discovered some alarming information. It appears that Brad has been using money from family members, including you, to fund illegal purchases and activities. We're still piecing everything together, but I thought you should know. My stomach dropped. Illegal activities? Like what? Brian hesitated for a moment before answering. We believe Brad has been purchasing stolen goods and reselling them. Electronics, car parts, that sort of thing. There's also evidence that he may have used the funds for some questionable online transaction. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I mean, Brad was always a mess financially, but this was a whole new level. Are you telling me I'm connected to this? I asked, feeling my chest tighten. Well, we've found records of several large transfers from your account to Brad's over the years, Brian explained. If investigators come across this, they may have questions about whether you were aware of how that money was being used. I wasn't, I said, probably louder than I meant to. I thought I was helping him with bills, rent, stuff for the kids. I had no idea he was doing anything illegal. Brian seemed unfazed by my outburst. That's why I'm reaching out. Emma wanted to make sure you were informed, in case this becomes a larger legal issue. She's already provided us with evidence, including Brad's financial records, text messages, and some receipts. It's clear she had no knowledge of this either. Does she think I'm involved? I asked, my voice tight. No, Brian said quickly. Emma doesn't believe you had anything to do with this. She knows you were trying to help, but she thought you deserved to know what's going on, especially since your name might come up during the investigation. For a moment, I couldn't even process it. I just sat there, staring at my computer screen while my mind raced. Stolen goods, online scams, and Brad had been using my money to fund it? I finally managed to ask, what happens now? Am I in trouble? Brian's tone was reassuring. At this point, you're not under investigation, but if you're contacted by law enforcement, I recommend being transparent about your interactions with Brad. We're working with Emma to protect her and the children, and we're confident that your role was purely supportive. You weren't complicit in any of this. Great, I muttered sarcastically. So I've been played, and I might get dragged into his mess. Awesome. Brian didn't say much to that, just told me he'd keep me updated if anything new came up. After we hung up, I sat there in silence for a while, trying to wrap my head around everything. I thought back to all the times Brad had come to me for help. The emergencies he needed money for, the rent he couldn't pay, the daycare fees, the utility bills. Was any of it even real? Or had he just been stringing me along the whole time? And Emma. God, I felt bad for her. She'd always been so quiet, so willing to go along with whatever Brad wanted. I couldn't imagine what it must have been like for her to find out her husband was doing this crap behind her back. And the kids? They didn't deserve any of this. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Not just at Brad, but at myself too. I'd let him take advantage of me for years, because I didn't want to rock the boat. I kept telling myself I was helping the family, that it was the right thing to do, but all I'd done was enable him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining worst-case scenarios. What if the cops showed up at my door? What if Brad somehow dragged me into this, even though I had nothing to do with it? The next morning, I woke up with a splitting headache and a sense of resolve. I wasn't going to let Brad screw me over any more than he already had. I called Brian back and asked him to send me copies of whatever evidence Emma had. If I was going to be tied to this mess, I wanted to know exactly what I was dealing with. When the documents arrived, I was furious all over again. There it was, in black and white. Bank statements, screenshots of shady transactions, even receipts for stolen items. And then there were my transfers, right there alongside them, making it look like I'd been funding his little side hustle. I called Brian again. I want to make this clear, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I had no idea he was doing this. I thought I was helping him with bills and groceries. If anyone comes asking, that's the truth. Brian assured me he understood, but it didn't do much to calm my nerves. I spent the rest of the day pacing around my apartment, alternating between anger and panic. I couldn't believe it had come to this. Brad had always been a screw-up, but this was next level. And the worst part, he probably didn't even feel bad about it. I decided right then that if anyone came knocking, I wouldn't protect him. Not anymore. He made his bed, and now he could lie in it. It didn't take long for Brad to make his next move, because of course, he couldn't just let things go. One morning, a few days after I'd spoken to Emma's lawyer, I was in the middle of my work-from-home routine when someone started banging on my front door. Not knocking, banging. I already had a pretty good guess who it was. Sure enough, when I opened the door, there was Brad, looking like absolute hell. He pushed past me into the apartment before I could even say anything. "Brad, what the hell are you doing?" I asked, slamming the door shut behind him. "We need to talk," he said, pacing like a caged animal. "No, we don't," I said. "Whatever mess you're in, I'm not part of it anymore." He stopped pacing and turned to me, his face a mix of anger and desperation. "Emma's leaving me," he said, like it was somehow my fault. "Yeah, I know," I said, crossing my arms. "And good for her." That hit a nerve. His face went red, and he clenched his fists like he was ready to start throwing punches. "What the hell is your problem, Luke? She's my wife. She's supposed to stand by me." I let out a bitter laugh. "Stand by you while you're buying stolen crap and dragging her and the kids into your mess? Yeah, no, I think she's making the right call." Brad's jaw tightened. "She's been talking to you, hasn't she? Filling your head with lies?" I rolled my eyes. "Brad, she didn't have to tell me anything. Your own actions are screwing you over. You can't blame me or Emma for that." He started pacing again, running his hands through his hair. "You don't get it, man. She's talking about lawyers and custody and all this legal crap. And now I've got cops sniffing around because of some stupid mix-up with a few transactions." "Mix-up?" I interrupted. "You mean the illegal crap you've been doing for who knows how long?" "That's not a mix-up, Brad. That's you being a selfish idiot. Now it's clear who the loser is." He glared at me, but I could see the fear behind his anger. "You don't know what it's like, Luke. Trying to keep a family together. Trying to make ends meet." "Don't even start," I cut him off. "I've been helping you make ends meet for years. I've done everything I could to make sure your family was taken care of. And this is what you did with it? So don't stand there and act like I'm the one who doesn't get it." For a moment, Brad looked like he was going to argue, but then he slumped into one of my kitchen chairs, his head in his hands. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad," he muttered. I thought I could fix everything." "Fix everything?" I said, incredulous. "You've made it worse for everyone. Emma's leaving, the cops are involved, and you've probably burned every bridge you had. And for what? A quick buck?" He didn't answer. He just sat there, staring at the table like it held the answers to all his problems. Finally, he said, "You're my brother, Luke. Can't you help me one last time?" I laughed, and not in a nice way. "One last time? You've been saying that for years, Brad. Every time you screw up, it's just one last time. Well, guess what? This time, I'm done. You're on your own." He looked up at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You don't mean that." "Oh, I do," I said firmly. "I meant it when I told you and everyone else I was done. I've spent years cleaning up your messes, and all it's gotten me is a front row seat to this train wreck. So no, I'm not helping you. Not with this. Not ever again." Brad jumped to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Fine," he snapped. "If you want to abandon your own family, go ahead. But don't come crying to me when you need something." I raised an eyebrow. "When have I ever needed anything from you? Seriously, name one time." He opened his mouth like he had a response ready, but nothing came out. After a few seconds, he just stormed past me to the door. "Screw you, Luke," he said over his shoulder before slamming the door behind him. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle. My heart was racing, and my hands were shaking a little, but I didn't feel bad. If anything, I felt relieved. Brad could try to guilt-trip me all he wanted, but I wasn't falling for it anymore. That evening, I sat down and thought about everything he'd said. The whole "you're my brother" argument kept replaying in my head, but it didn't hit the way it used to. I used to feel obligated to help him because he was family. I'd tell myself it was my duty, that I couldn't just let him fail. But now? Now I realized that being family didn't mean letting someone walk all over you. Brad had made his choices. He chose to lie, to get involved in illegal crap, and now he was dealing with the consequences. It wasn't my job to fix his life. It never was. The next day, I got a text from Emma. "Did Brad come by? He's been acting erratic, and I'm worried about what he might do." I told her about the visit, sparing her the more colorful details, and reassured her that I wasn't letting him drag me back into his mess. She thanked me and said she was taking steps to protect herself and the kids. Hearing that made me feel better. At least someone was making smart decisions in all of this. Brad, on the other hand, was spiraling, and there wasn't much anyone could do about it, least of all me. When I got a text from Emma a couple of weeks later, I wasn't totally shocked. It was a simple message. "Hey, can we talk? I need your help." At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to get involved. I mean, I'd finally managed to cut Brad off, And even though Emma and I had always gotten along, she was still part of that mess. But something about her tone, or maybe just the fact that I still felt bad for her and the kids, made me agree to meet her. We met at a quiet coffee shop on a weekday afternoon. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept in days, but there was a determination in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. It was like she'd reached her own breaking point and wasn't going to back down this time. "I'm leaving him," she said as soon as we sat down. No preamble, no small talk, just straight to the point. "Good," I said, nodding. "It's about time." She gave a weak smile, like she appreciated the support, but wasn't quite ready to celebrate yet. "I've been thinking about it for a while, but after everything that's come out, I can't stay anymore. Not for him, not for the kids. It's just too much." I didn't blame her. Staying with him would have been insane. "So what's the plan?" I asked. She hesitated, fidgeting with her coffee cup. "I've found a new place," she said finally. "It's small, but it's in a good neighborhood with decent schools. The kids deserve a fresh start, away from all of this." But I could already see where this was going. "But you need help to make it happen," I said. She nodded, looking embarrassed. "I hate to ask, Luke, especially after everything you've been through, but I'm stretched so thin right now. Between lawyers, moving expenses, and making sure the kids are okay, I don't have a lot of options." I leaned back in my chair, letting out a long breath. Part of me wanted to say no. I mean, wasn't this exactly what I'd been trying to avoid? Being dragged back into their drama? But then I thought about her kids. They didn't ask for any of this. They didn't deserve to grow up in a household where their dad was constantly screwing up and their mom was stuck cleaning up the mess. "All right," I said finally. "I'll help. But just this once, and only for you and the kids. Brad's on his own." Emma's eyes filled with tears, and she reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Thank you, Luke. You don't know what this means to me." We spent the next hour going over the details. She needed money for a deposit on the new place and some basic necessities to get started. I transferred her the money that night, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like I was being used. This wasn't Brad guilting me into fixing his problems, or my parents trying to make me feel like I owed them something. This was about helping someone who genuinely needed it, and who was doing the right thing for her kids. A few days later, Emma sent me a text. "We're leaving today. Thank you for everything." We talked for a little while, mostly about her plans and how the kids were adjusting. She mentioned that she was looking for a better job and was working with her lawyer to finalize the separation. It sounded like she had a long road ahead, but at least she was on the right track. I still felt a little weird about helping her after cutting off the rest of the family, but I didn't regret it. Emma wasn't the problem, and neither were the kids. They were just collateral damage in Brad's never-ending cycle of chaos. It didn't happen overnight, but eventually Brad's actions caught up with him. I found out through Emma. She'd been keeping me updated here and there, mostly because of the kids. Apparently, the investigation into Brad's stolen goods operation had gained serious traction. By the time the police had everything pieced together, they were charging him with multiple counts of possession and distribution of stolen property. Honestly, I wasn't surprised. Brad had been pushing his luck for years, and it was only a matter of time before the house of cards came tumbling down. What did surprise me, though, was the fact that my name came up during the investigation. Not because I was involved, but because of all the money I'd given him over the years. I got a call from a detective one afternoon, asking if I'd be willing to come down to the station for a statement. Even though I knew I'd done nothing wrong, my stomach was in knots. I couldn't shake the fear that somehow Brad's mess would drag me down with him. When I got to the station, I sat across from the detective in a tiny bare office. He asked me about the money I'd sent Brad, why I'd sent it, what it was for, if I'd known anything about what he was doing. I laid it all out for him. I thought I was helping him pay bills, take care of his kids, keep his family afloat. I had no idea he was using that money for illegal crap. If I'd known, I would have cut him off years ago. The detective nodded, taking notes. He didn't seem skeptical, which was a relief. Then he slid a stack of papers across the table. Bank statements, transfers, receipts, all the evidence they'd gathered. "From what we can see, your story checks out," he said. "The funds you sent match the timeline of when Brad was claiming financial hardship. We also have records of him falsifying documents to make it look like he needed money for things like rent or daycare. It wasn't just that Brad had used me, it was that he'd gone out of his way to manipulate me." "So I'm in the clear?" I asked, still nervous. "You're not under investigation," the detective confirmed. "It's clear you were another victim of his schemes. We may need you to testify if this goes to trial, but you're not liable for anything." Hearing that was like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I wasn't going to be dragged down by Brad's mess after all. A couple of weeks later, the news broke that Brad had been arrested. Emma texted me when it happened. They finally got him. He's being held without bail. It was almost surreal. For years, Brad had been skating by, avoiding consequences, using everyone around him to clean up his messes, but now he was sitting in a jail cell, and there was no one left to bail him out. Well, almost no one. About a week after Brad's arrest, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I didn't answer, but they left a voicemail. It was my mom. "Luke," she said, her voice shaky, "please call us back. It's about Brad. He's in serious trouble, and we need your help." I rolled my eyes and deleted the voicemail. I should have known they'd come crawling back the moment things got tough. The next day, there was another voicemail, this time from my dad. "Son, I know you're upset with us, but Brad is still your brother. He made mistakes, sure, but he needs us now more than ever. Please call us back." I ignored that one too. Then came the texts. Mom was practically begging me to step in, saying things like, "You know Brad's not a bad person at heart. He just got mixed up with the wrong people. We can fix this if we work together." Dad's messages were more guilt-trippy. "Do you really want your brother to rot in jail? Family doesn't turn their back on each other." At first, I was furious. How could they still defend him after everything he'd done? After he'd lied, stolen, and dragged my name through the mud? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was just who they were. They'd always coddled Brad, always made excuses for him, always put his needs above everyone else's. This was just another chapter in the same sad story. So I sent one final text to the group chat they'd started bombarding me with. "I'm not helping Brad. He made his choices, and now he's facing the consequences. Don't contact me about this again." I didn't get a response. A few months later, Brad's case went to trial. I didn't follow it too closely, but Emma kept me updated. Apparently, he tried to plead ignorance, claiming he didn't know the goods were stolen. But the prosecution had mountains of evidence against him. Bank records, text messages, even a couple of recorded phone calls. He didn't stand a chance. He was sentenced to several years in prison, with no possibility of parole for at least half that time. Emma told me he cried in court when the verdict was read, but I didn't feel sorry for him. He'd had every opportunity to turn his life around, and he'd wasted all of them. As for me, life moved on. Emma and the kids were doing well in their new house. She found a steady job and was finally starting to feel secure again. Every now and then, she'd send me a text or a picture of the kids, just to let me know they were okay. My parents tried reaching out a few more times, but I ignored them. I'd made my decision, and I wasn't going to let them guilt me into reopening that door. They'd chosen their favorite, and now they were stuck with him. It's been over a year now since I last spoke to any of them. And honestly, I don't miss it. My life is quieter, calmer, and so much better without the constant drama. Cutting them off was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the best decision I ever made. Brad's still in prison, my parents are probably still stewing about how ungrateful I am, and I'm over here living my life. And you know what? I'm perfectly fine with that. Story 4. I'm leaving you for Liam. He's everything you're not, my girlfriend announced while I was literally paying for her MBA program. "You're just a safe option, but I deserve better." I calmly said, "Good luck," and canceled her tuition. That same hour, 2 days later, she was begging me back, after discovering her new boyfriend was unemployed and maxed out on credit cards. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. All right, Reddit. This is going to be a long one, but I promise it's worth reading to the end. Happened about 6 months ago, and I'm still processing how satisfying this turned out. Grab some popcorn, because this roller coaster has twists, turns, and the most satisfying ending you'll read all week. Some background first. I'm Jake, 30 years old, work as a project manager for a mid-sized construction company in Denver, making about $95,000 a year. Not rich, but comfortable. I own a decent 3-bedroom house in a good neighborhood that I bought 3 years ago for $385,000. Worked my ass off to get where I am. Started as a laborer, right out of high school. Went to community college at night. Worked up through the ranks. No handouts, just pure grind. I'm not some Chad who gets women easily. I'm probably a 6 out of 10 on a good day. 5 feet 9 inches, average build, thinning hair that I keep buzzed short. But I'm stable, reliable, and apparently that makes me catnip for a certain type of woman. Spoiler alert, that type is not the kind you want to marry. That's where Ashley comes in. Met her about 2.5 years ago at my buddy's barbecue. She was 24, working part-time at some overpriced boutique in Cherry Creek, making maybe $25,000 a year if she was lucky. But damn, this girl was a solid 9 out of 10. Blonde hair, green eyes, 5 feet 6 inches with curves in all the right places. The kind of woman who could stop traffic just by walking down the street. She was living with 3 roommates in a cramped apartment in a sketchy part of town, constantly complaining about money. Her car was a beat-up 2009 Honda Civic that broke down every other week. She dressed nice when we went out, but I could tell she was stretching every dollar to maintain her image. Being the nice guy simp that I was, I started helping out here and there. Dinner dates turned into me always picking up the check. Her car broke down, I'd Uber over and give her rides. Her roommates were too loud for her to sleep. She started spending more nights at my place. What started as occasional sleepovers turned into her basically living at my house within about 6 months. She kept clothes in my closet, her makeup covered my bathroom counter, and somehow I was buying groceries for 2 people even though she wasn't contributing shit to the household. But I was pussy-whipped and didn't care. Ashley knew exactly how to play me. She'd walk around in tiny shorts and tank tops, give me random blowjobs when I got home from work, cook dinner occasionally, using ingredients I bought, and make me feel like I was dating a model. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. The first major red flag should have been when she started talking about wanting to get her master's degree in marketing. Jake, I'm never going to make real money working retail, she'd say, while painting her nails with $50 polish. I need to elevate myself, but grad school is so expensive. DePaul University's MBA program cost $42,000 for the full degree. Ashley claimed she'd looked into financial aid, but didn't qualify for much because her parents made too much money, even though they weren't helping her with shit. She'd sigh dramatically and talk about how she'd probably be stuck in retail forever because she couldn't afford to better herself. Like a fucking idiot, I offered to pay for it. Really? Jake, are you serious? That's amazing. You'd really do that for me? She jumped on me right there on the couch, and we had some of the best sex of my life. I was thinking with my dick instead of my brain, convinced I was investing in our future together. She'd get her degree, land some high-paying marketing job, and we'd be this power couple living the American dream. What a moron I was. Once Ashley started the MBA program, things got even more expensive. She needed a new laptop for school, $1,000 to $800, professional clothes for presentations, $3,200 shopping spree, and a car that wouldn't embarrass her in the student parking lot. I co-signed for a lease on a 2022 Honda CR-V because her old Civic wasn't professional enough. She cut back her retail hours to focus on school, which meant her already tiny income basically disappeared. Suddenly, I was covering everything. Rent. She still wasn't on my mortgage. Utilities, groceries, her car payment, insurance, gas, eating out, entertainment, and of course the monthly tuition payments. My monthly expenses went from about $3,200 to over $6,100. I was still saving money, but my emergency fund stopped growing. Ashley would thank me with sex and affection, so I figured it was temporary. Once she graduated and got a good job, she'd start contributing more. The entitlement started creeping in slowly. She'd complain if I bought the cheap groceries instead of the organic shit she preferred. She wanted to eat out more often because she was too stressed from school to cook. Her beauty routine became insane. $200 monthly for lash extensions, $150 for nails, $300 hair appointments every 6 weeks, $400 monthly on skincare products. Jake, I need to look professional for networking events, she'd say when I questioned the expenses. This is an investment in our future. Our future. I was paying for it, but apparently it was ours. She also completely redecorated my living room without asking. Came home one day to find $4,200 worth of new furniture, artwork, and decorative bullshit that looked like it came straight from a basic bitch Pinterest board. When I asked what happened to discussing major purchases, she said I was being controlling and that the house needed a woman's touch. The sex started declining around month 8 of her program. She was always too tired or too stressed or had too much homework. Our Friday night date nights turned into her studying while I watched Netflix alone. She'd come to bed after I was already asleep and be gone before I woke up for work. I chalked it up to the stress of graduate school. Big mistake. About 10 months into her program, Ashley started mentioning this guy from her strategic marketing class named Liam. At first, it was innocent enough. Liam thinks we should approach the project this way. Or, Liam knows someone who works at a consulting firm. But then the mentions became more frequent and more detailed. Liam drove a BMW M3. Liam owned his own digital marketing consultancy. Liam had clients like Pepsi and Nike. Liam was taking the MBA program to expand his network and learn corporate strategy because he was planning to scale his business nationally. She'd come home from study groups at 11 p.m., talking about how brilliant Liam was. how he had all these insights about entrepreneurship and business development. She started dressing up more for school, wearing outfits that seemed way too sexy for classroom presentations. Our conversations became all about Liam's latest business advice, or some story about his success. Meanwhile, I'm working 50-hour weeks managing construction projects, dealing with contractors and city permits, and budget overruns. So this trust fund kid can fund my girlfriend's lifestyle while she daydreams about some other dude. The final red flag was when Ashley started going to networking events multiple times a week. These were always last-minute invitations where Liam had extra tickets to some business mixer or industry conference. She'd get dressed up like she was going to a nightclub and come home past midnight with stories about all the important people she met. When I suggested coming along to one of these events, she said they were student only or invitation only, or that it would be awkward to bring a boyfriend. But she never had a problem bringing up how Liam knew all the right people and was introducing her to potential employers. I started feeling like a walking ATM. Ashley would kiss me goodbye in the morning, spend all day at school with Liam, come home and talk about Liam, then claim she was too tired for sex because of all the networking she'd been doing. But I convinced myself I was being paranoid. She was just ambitious and focused on her career. Liam was helping her make connections. I was being insecure and controlling. Fuck, I was naive. March 15th. I'll never forget that date because it's when my entire world got flipped upside down. I was working from home that day, dealing with some permitting issues for a commercial project. Ashley had a late class that finished around 2 p.m., so I expected her home by 3. When she walked in at 2:30, she had this look on her face. Nervous but determined, like she'd been practicing a speech in the car. "Jake, we need to talk," she said, standing in the doorway instead of coming over to kiss me hello like she usually did. My stomach dropped. Every guy knows that phrase means your life is about to get destroyed. "I'm in love with Liam," she said, no emotion in her voice. "We've been together for 4 months. I'm moving in with him this weekend." 4 months. 4 fucking months she'd been cheating on me while I paid for every aspect of her life. While I was busting my ass at work to fund her princess lifestyle, she was getting fucked by some other guy and planning her exit strategy. The numbers hit me like a truck. 4 months meant it started right around Thanksgiving. All those study groups and networking events were just cover for her affair. She'd been looking me in the eye every morning, kissing me goodbye, and going to spend the day with her boyfriend. "I see," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break down. "I already packed most of my stuff," she continued, gesturing toward 2 suitcases by the door. I recognized them as the matching Louis Vuitton set I'd bought her for Christmas. $3,400 that I'd put on my credit card, because she deserved something special. Liam's successful, Jake. Really successful. He's taking me to Aspen this weekend to meet some of his business partners. He says I have real potential, and he wants to help me network with the right people. The audacity was breathtaking. She was essentially telling me that I wasn't good enough to help her career while standing in the house I owned, wearing clothes I bought after spending 2 years funding her dreams. "When?" I asked. "When what? When did it start?" The truth, this time. She had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "Right after Thanksgiving. But Jake, I didn't plan for this to happen. Liam and we connect on a different level. He understands my ambitions. He's going places, and he wants to take me with him. Going places. Like my house wasn't good enough. Like my stable career and financial support weren't taking her anywhere." "I understand," I said. "I hope you two are very happy together." She looked surprised, like she expected me to beg, or cry, or fight for her. Maybe throw a tantrum and make her feel important. But I was already thinking ahead. She'd made her choice. Time to deal with the consequences. "That's it?" she asked. "You're not even going to fight for us?" "What's to fight for? You've been cheating on me for 4 months. You're in love with someone else. You're moving out. Seems like you've made all the decisions already." "Jake, I thought you'd be more upset." "I'm processing. Right now, I'm just trying to understand the timeline." She shifted uncomfortably. "Liam will be here around 6 to help me move the rest of my stuff." "That's fine. I'll make sure to be out of the way." What I didn't tell her was that I'd be using those few hours very productively. After Ashley left to grab lunch, probably with Liam, I sat down and started thinking strategically instead of emotionally. She'd blindsided me, but that didn't mean I had to just take it lying down. First, I made a list of everything I was paying for. Her MBA tuition, $42,000 total, about $28,000 already paid. Her car lease, $420 per month. Her car insurance, $180 per month. Her phone bill, $85 per month. Her health insurance through my employer, $240 a month. Groceries, utilities, and household expenses, approximately $800 per month. Her credit card, she was an authorized user, approximately $1,200 per month average. Miscellaneous expenses like dining out, entertainment, her beauty routine, approximately $1,000 per month. I was essentially funding a $4,000 a month lifestyle for someone who just told me she'd been cheating on me for a third of our relationship. But here's the thing. I'm not an emotional guy. I'm a project manager. When there's a problem, you assess the situation, make a plan, and execute it efficiently. Emotions can come later. Ashley thought she was trading up from a stable guy making $95,000 to some hotshot entrepreneur with major clients. She was betting that Liam's success would replace my financial support. That was a risky bet, and I was about to make sure it didn't pay off. My first call was to DePaul's financial aid office. Hi, this is Jake Morrison. I need to speak to someone about Ashley Rodriguez's tuition payment plan. After being transferred twice, I got the financial aid director on the line. I explained calmly that Ashley and I were no longer together, that I was the third-party guarantor on all payment plans, and that I needed to withdraw from any future obligations immediately. I'll honor the current semester since it ends in 6 weeks, but I'm formally withdrawing from summer and fall semester payments, I said. Please send me written confirmation. They needed 48 hours to process the paperwork, but confirmed that as the guarantor, I had every right to withdraw. No legal obligation to continue paying once the current term ended. Next, I called my credit card companies. Ashley was an authorized user on my American Express and Chase cards, the ones she used for her shopping sprees and beauty appointments. I removed her from both accounts immediately. Then I called my car insurance company and removed her from my policy. She was driving the CRV that I co-signed for, but if she wasn't living here anymore, she needed her own insurance. I also called my cell phone provider and removed her line from my family plan. If she wanted to stay in touch with Liam, she could get her own phone bill. The coup de grace was changing every password she might know. Netflix, Amazon Prime, Spotify, Hulu, even the Wi-Fi password. If she wanted entertainment at Liam's place, they could pay for their own subscriptions. But I wasn't done. Ashley had left behind about half her wardrobe, all the expensive shit I'd bought her over the past 2 years. Designer jeans, Lululemon workout clothes, the $600 boots she absolutely needed for winter, countless tops and dresses from Nordstrom and Anthropologie. I loaded everything into garbage bags and drove to the nearest Goodwill, donated every single item, and made sure to get receipts for the tax write-off. If she wanted her clothes back, she could go thrift shopping. The final touch was having a locksmith come change all the locks. Cost me $240, but it was worth every penny for the peace of mind. By 5:30 p.m., Ashley's new reality was locked and loaded. Ashley came back around 5:45 with Liam in tow. I watched from my bedroom window as they pulled up in a beat-up 2018 BMW 328i with a dented bumper and mismatched rims. Not exactly the M3 she'd been bragging about. Liam looked like exactly what you'd expect. Tall, skinny, man bun, wearing a suit that probably cost more than he could afford. The kind of guy who says, "Let's circle back on that," in casual conversation, and thinks he's sophisticated for drinking craft beer. They loaded her suitcases into his car, along with a few boxes of random stuff. I noticed Ashley trying her key in the front door, then looking confused when it didn't work. She knocked, and I went downstairs to let them in. "Hey, Jake, this is Liam," she said awkwardly. Liam stepped forward with his hand out. "Nice to meet you, man. Ashley's told me a lot about you." I bet she had. I shook his hand without saying anything. "Jake, my key doesn't work," Ashley said. "I changed the locks." "Why would you do that? You don't live here anymore." She looked hurt, like this was somehow unexpected. "I just need to grab a few more things from upstairs." "What things?" "My clothes, my makeup, some jewelry." "Already donated the clothes." "Your makeup is in a box by the door." "What jewelry?" "My earrings, the necklace you bought me for my birthday, my rings." "Those were gifts. They're yours." I went upstairs and came back with a small jewelry box. "Here." She opened it and started looking confused. "Where's the Cartier bracelet?" "And the Tiffany necklace?" "Which Cartier bracelet?" "The one you bought me for Valentine's Day. It cost like $1,500. "Oh, that one. I returned it." Her face went white. "You can't return jewelry after 2 months. You can if you keep the receipt and the store has a good relationship with you as a customer. Turns out they're very understanding when you explain that your girlfriend was cheating on you." Liam was starting to look uncomfortable. "Maybe we should just go, Ash." "No, this is ridiculous. Jake, you can't just take back gifts. Watch me. Also, you might want to check your credit cards. And your phone. And probably Netflix when you get to Liam's place. The realization was starting to hit her. What are you saying? I'm saying that as of today, you're financially independent. Congratulations. She turned to Liam. This is crazy, right? He can't just cut me off like this. Liam was studying his shoes. Let's just go, Ashley. We'll figure it out. They left with Ashley shooting me death glares. I went inside, ordered pizza, and had the most peaceful evening I'd had in months. Thursday morning, my phone started ringing at 7 a.m. Ashley calling frantically. Jake, I just tried to use my credit card for coffee and it was declined. That's because you're not an authorized user anymore. You can't do that. I need that card. For what? You have a job. You have Liam. Figure it out. My job pays shit and you know it. I have expenses. Not my problem. The calls kept coming. Her phone had been shut off by noon Wednesday. Apparently, she'd never paid attention to when the bill was due. She called from Liam's phone, from random numbers, even had the nerve to call my office. Friday afternoon, she showed up at my door looking frantic. I could see Liam's car in the driveway, but he stayed in the driver's seat like a coward. Jake, please, we need to talk. We are talking. I got a notice from DePaul about summer tuition. They said you withdrew from the payment plan. That's correct. You can't do that. I'm halfway through the program. Actually, I can do that. And I did. This is fucking insane. You're destroying my future over a relationship. No, you destroyed your future when you chose to cheat on me with Liam. I'm just not paying for it anymore. Liam and I will figure out the tuition, but I need my credit cards back. I have bills. What bills? You don't pay rent, you don't pay utilities, your phone is on Liam's plan now, right? She looked trapped. I have expenses, personal stuff. Like what? My lashes, my nails, my hair appointments. I can't just stop taking care of myself. The entitlement was breathtaking. She was worried about her beauty routine, while her education was about to get flushed down the toilet. Ashley, let me explain something to you. I was paying for those things because you were my girlfriend. You're not my girlfriend anymore. You're Liam's girlfriend. So Liam can pay for your lashes. He doesn't understand how expensive it is to be a woman. Sounds like a conversation you should have with him. She started crying. Real tears, not the fake manipulative kind. Jake, please. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. Liam isn't... He's not what I thought he was. Now we were getting somewhere interesting. How so? He said he owned a consulting business with major clients. But Jake, he rents a studio apartment in Capitol Hill with a roommate. A fucking roommate. He drives his mom's old BMW and works for some tiny startup making maybe $40,000 a year. He lied about everything. The irony was perfect. She'd left me, a guy with a stable career, his own house, and enough money to fund her lifestyle, for some wannabe entrepreneur who was making less than she did at the boutique. That sounds like a Liam problem. I can't stay at his place anymore. His roommate is some weird gamer guy who walks around in his underwear. There's no privacy, no space for my stuff. It's disgusting. Where are you staying? In my car. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Ashley, you made your choice. You spent 4 months planning your exit strategy, cheating on me while I paid for your entire life. You chose Liam over stability. You chose excitement over loyalty. You chose to blow up a good relationship for some fantasy that turned out to be bullshit. Those are your choices. And these are your consequences. Please, Jake, I'll do anything. Anything. Anything except be faithful, apparently. She left crying. Liam never even got out of the car. Over the weekend, Ashley's entire family started calling me. Her mom, her sister, her aunt, even her dad, who I'd met exactly twice in 2 years. Jake, you can't abandon Ashley like this, her mom said when she called Saturday morning. She made a mistake, but she's learned her lesson. Mrs. Rodriguez, she didn't make a mistake. She made a deliberate choice to cheat on me for 4 months while I paid for her education and lifestyle. She's our baby girl. She's confused and scared. She's 24 years old, not a baby. And if she's confused, maybe she should have thought about that before she decided to fuck around on the guy paying her bills. You don't have to be crude. And you don't have to call me demanding that I financially support your daughter's infidelity. Her sister Maria was even worse. She called Sunday evening with a full guilt trip prepared. Jake, Ashley really loves you. She was just confused. Liam manipulated her into thinking he was successful. She's the victim here. A 24-year-old woman got manipulated into a 4-month affair? That's your defense? She was vulnerable. She's never had a real relationship before you. Well, now she's learning what happens when you destroy a real relationship for fake promises. You're being cruel. She's sleeping in her car. She chose Liam. She can sleep in his car. The best call came from her dad on Monday. He tried to pull some old-school macho bullshit. Son, you need to man up and take care of Ashley. That's what real men do. They protect their women. Sir, with respect, real men don't pay for other dudes' girlfriends. Maybe if you taught your daughter about loyalty instead of entitlement, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Don't you dare lecture me about my parenting. Then don't lecture me about my responsibilities to a cheating ex. He hung up on me. Meanwhile, Ashley was waging a social media war. She posted a long Facebook rant about how I was vindictive and controlling for cutting off her credit cards and tuition payments. She painted herself as the victim of an emotionally abusive relationship where I used money to control her. The post got a lot of sympathy at first, especially from her girlfriends who didn't know the full story. But then some of our mutual friends started asking questions in the comments. Wait, didn't you cheat on him? My buddy Chris commented. It's complicated, Ashley replied. How is cheating complicated? My coworker Sarah asked. Ashley ended up deleting the post after getting roasted in the comments, but not before I screenshotted everything for my own records. Tuesday brought the legal threat. Ashley hired some bottom feeder lawyer who sent me a demand letter claiming I had promised to pay for her entire degree and that stopping payment was breach of implied contract and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The letter was laughably unprofessional. Typos, wrong legal citations, basically a template downloaded from some legal website. But it was enough to piss me off. I called my buddy Mike, who's an actual lawyer, and showed him the letter. He started laughing immediately. Jake, this is embarrassing. No court would even look at this case. You were being generous, not legally obligated. You want me to respond? Yeah, but make it brutal. Mike sent back a letter that basically told them to fuck themselves in proper legal terminology. He pointed out that I had no contractual obligation to pay for Ashley's education, that she was an adult who could make her own financial arrangements, and that any further frivolous legal threats would result in a countersuit for harassment. We never heard from that lawyer again. But Ashley wasn't done embarrassing herself. She started a GoFundMe called Help Me Finish My Education, with a sob story about how her abusive ex-boyfriend had cut off her tuition to punish her for leaving him. She claimed I was wealthy and vindictive, that I was destroying her dreams out of spite. The GoFundMe was a disaster. She raised $430 total over 3 weeks, mostly small donations from people who didn't know the real story. But then people started sharing it in local Facebook groups, and our mutual friends began posting the truth in the comments. This girl cheated on her boyfriend for months while he paid for everything, one friend wrote. She's not a victim, she's a user. I know Jake personally, and he's one of the most generous, honest guys you'll ever meet, another commented. Ashley destroyed a good relationship and now wants strangers to pay for her mistakes. She ended up deleting the GoFundMe after it became a public roasting session. The $430 she raised wasn't even enough to cover one credit hour. Here's where the story gets really good. Remember how I mentioned I work in construction project management? Well, part of my job involves background checks on contractors and subcontractors. I have access to certain databases and professional networks for verifying licenses, insurance, financial stability, criminal history, all perfectly legal stuff that helps protect my company from liability. I decided to do some digging on Liam, just out of curiosity. What I found was fucking gold. This wannabe entrepreneur had some serious skeletons. He'd been fired from his last real job at a marketing agency for falsifying client reports and padding his timesheets. He had $31,000 in credit card debt spread across 7 different cards, student loans in default totaling $18,000, and, here's the best part, an active warrant for unpaid child support. Turns out Liam had a 3-year-old daughter in Milwaukee with some girl named Jessica. He owed $12,800 in back child support and had been dodging the payments for over a year. There was also a court judgment against him for $4,200 from a former landlord for property damage and unpaid rent. But wait, it gets better. The consulting business he bragged about? It was an LLC that existed only on paper, never filed taxes, never had any reported income, no business licenses or permits. The startup he actually worked for was one of those sketchy MLM supplement companies where he was basically a door-to-door salesman trying to recruit people into his downline. The BMW registered to his mother. He was driving mommy's hand-me-down and telling people it was his. I had court documents, employment records, financial judgments, even photos of the child support warrant. This guy wasn't just broke. He was actively running from his responsibilities and lying about everything. So I did what any reasonable person would do with this information. I compiled it all into a nice, neat package and created an anonymous email account. The subject line was simple: information about your boyfriend Liam. I attached everything: the court documents, the employment termination records, the photos of his baby mama and kid from her Facebook page, the business registration showing his LLC had no activity, even the lien on the BMW showing it belonged to his mother. The email was just one line. Thought you should know who you're really living with. I sent it to Ashley's Gmail on a Thursday afternoon and then sat back to wait. Friday morning, my phone rang at 6 a.m. It was Ashley, and she was completely hysterical. Jake, please, I fucked up so bad. Please help me, please. What's wrong now? Liam? He's not who he said he was. He has a fucking kid. A kid, Jake. He never told me he had a kid. Okay. And he's broke. He owes thousands in child support. He got fired from his last job for lying. His business is fake. Everything is fake. I tried to sound surprised. How did you find all this out? Someone sent me documents, court papers, and employment records and pictures of his daughter. Jake, I'm living with a deadbeat dad who's been lying about everything. That sounds really tough, Ashley. It gets worse. When I confronted him about it, he admitted everything. But then he asked me to help him pay the child support. He said we were a team now and that I needed to invest in our future by helping him get caught up on his payments. The audacity of this guy was impressive. He was asking his sugar baby to help him pay for the kid he'd abandoned. What did you tell him? I told him he was fucking insane. I don't have any money. You cut off all my cards. I can't even afford to get my nails done. So what happened? He kicked me out. Said if I wasn't going to be supportive of his complicated situation, then I could find somewhere else to stay. Jake, I'm living in my fucking Honda Civic. The karma was so perfect it almost seemed scripted. I'm sorry to hear that, Ashley. Please, Jake. I know I don't deserve it, but can I please just stay on your couch for a few days? I'll pay rent. I'll do whatever you want. I'm sleeping in a parking lot behind a 7-Eleven. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. She was completely broken down, desperate, with nowhere else to turn. Time for the nuclear option. Ashley, let me make sure I understand the situation. You cheated on me for 4 months while I paid for your entire lifestyle. You left me for a guy you thought was rich and successful. You had your family harass me. You tried to sue me. You started a public fundraiser calling me abusive. And now that your fantasy boyfriend turned out to be a broke deadbeat with a secret kid, you want me to rescue you. I know, I was stupid. I was selfish. I fucked up everything. But I learned my lesson, I swear. What lesson is that? That I had it good with you. That I threw away the best thing in my life for some loser who lied to me about everything. And that I'm a terrible person who doesn't deserve your help, but I'm begging anyway because I'm desperate and I have nowhere else to go. At least she was finally being honest about what kind of person she was. Here's what's going to happen, I said calmly. You're going to post on every social media platform you have, Facebook, Instagram, whatever else, telling the complete truth about what you did to me. You're going to admit that you cheated for 4 months, that you lied to my face, that you used me for money, and that I did nothing wrong by cutting you off. You're going to apologize publicly and tell everyone that Liam turned out to be a fraud who has a secret kid and is thousands in debt. Jake, that's humiliating. Not as humiliating as sleeping in your car because you chose a deadbeat over a good man. If I do that, will you help me? I'll consider it. You promise? I promise I'll consider it. She actually fucking did it. Within 2 hours, Ashley had posted identical messages on Facebook and Instagram with a long, groveling confession. I need to publicly apologize for my terrible behavior and set the record straight about Jake Morrison. For the past few months, I've been spreading lies about him being controlling and abusive, but the truth is that I'm the one who behaved horribly. Jake supported me financially for over a year, paying for my MBA tuition, my car, my living expenses, everything. He was nothing but generous and loving to me. In return, I cheated on him for 4 months with a classmate named Liam, who I thought was successful and wealthy. I lied to Jake's face every single day while he was working hard to support my dreams. I planned my exit strategy while he was paying my bills. When Jake found out, he rightfully cut off all financial support, and instead of taking responsibility for my actions, I tried to paint him as the villain. The truth is that Liam lied about everything. He doesn't own a business, he's broke, he has a secret child he doesn't support, and he's thousands in debt. He used me just like I used Jake, except Jake actually had the means to support me and chose to do so out of love. I destroyed the best relationship I ever had for a fantasy that lasted less than a week once the lies came out. I am completely in the wrong here. Jake is a good man who deserves better than what I put him through. I'm sorry for lying about him publicly, and I'm sorry for taking advantage of his kindness. I'm posting this because I owe him a public apology and because people deserve to know the truth about what really happened. The comments were absolutely brutal. Our mutual friends, her coworkers, even people I didn't know were roasting her in the replies. Finally, some honesty from you, Ashley. Jake deserves so much better. Girl, you fumbled the bag hard. A good man with his own house who pays for your school and you cheat on him? What's wrong with you? This is what happens when you're a gold digger but bad at picking gold. Jake, if you're reading this, you dodged a bullet. Don't take her back. Ashley admitting she's a cheating user? Character development, I guess. My personal favorite was from her former coworker at the boutique. We all knew you were using Jake. Glad he finally wised up. The post got over 200 comments, most of them negative. A few of her girlfriends tried to defend her with everyone makes mistakes bullshit, but they got shouted down by people who knew the real story. After she posted the confession, Ashley called me back around 8 p.m. Okay, I did it. I posted everything like you asked. People are being really mean in the comments, but I did it. Now will you help me? This was the moment I'd been building toward for weeks. The moment of perfect poetic justice. Ashley, I appreciate you finally telling the truth about what happened. It took a lot of courage to admit publicly that you're a cheating, lying user who destroyed a good relationship for a fantasy. So you'll let me stay at your place? No. Silence. What? I said I'd consider helping you if you posted the truth. I considered it. The answer is no. But, but I did what you asked. I humiliated myself. I told everyone the truth. You told everyone the truth because it was the right thing to do, not because I asked you to. You should have done that months ago instead of trying to destroy my reputation. Jake, please, I have nowhere to go. I'm living in my car. You made your bed with Liam. Now you get to lie in it, alone. This is cruel. I apologized. I admitted I was wrong. You apologized because you're desperate and homeless, not because you actually feel bad about what you did. If Liam had turned out to be actually rich, you'd still be with him, and you'd never have admitted to anything. That's not true. Ashley, if I gave you a time machine right now and let you go back to Thanksgiving, would you choose not to cheat on me? Or would you just be smarter about picking your affair partner? The long pause told me everything I needed to know. That's not fair. That's exactly what I thought. You're not sorry you cheated. You're sorry you got caught. You're not sorry you lied. You're sorry the lies didn't work out. You're not sorry you used me. You're sorry I stopped letting you use me. Jake, please, I'll do anything. I'll sign a contract saying I'll pay you back. I'll get a job and give you half my paycheck. I'll clean your house. I'll cook for you. I'll do whatever you want sexually. Please just don't leave me on the street. And there it was. The final offer. She was willing to prostitute herself to get back into my house and my wallet. Ashley, I wouldn't take you back if you were the last woman on earth. You've shown me exactly who you are and I believe you. You're a user, a liar, and a cheat. You add nothing to my life except drama and expenses. Fine. Fine. Fuck you, Jake. You're going to regret this. When I get back on my feet, you're going to see what you missed out on. I'm sure I will. Good luck with everything. I hung up and blocked her number. Story 5. This story is titled, My Parents Left Me to Bleed Out, so they could celebrate my brother's success. Now they're the ones losing everything. So I've been holding this shit in for a long time. Figured Reddit might be the place to finally get it off my chest. I'm Derek, 30 years old, and I run a small custom motorcycle repair shop. Well, I used to anyway. More on that later. Growing up in Bristol, Tennessee fucking sucked. Not because of the town, but because of my family situation. See, I have a younger brother, Tyler. He's 3 years younger than me, and in my parents' eyes, the sun basically shines out of his ass. Our house was basically the Tyler show 24/7. Our living room looked like some kind of weird baseball museum. All his trophies displayed like they were fucking Olympic medals or something. Team photos everywhere. His old jerseys hung up in frames like he was Babe Ruth or some shit. I'm not even kidding. My parents had a special cabinet built just for his baseball stuff. Meanwhile, my stuff? I was pretty good at auto shop in high school. Won a few awards for engine rebuilds. Know where those ended up? In a drawer somewhere? Or the trash? Maybe got a "that's nice" from my dad once in a blue moon. I remember spending a whole summer when I was 16 fixing up this old Kawasaki engine. Saved for months working at the gas station to buy all the parts. When I finally got it running, I was so proud I called my dad out to the garage to show him. Dude barely looked at it. Stood there for maybe 20 seconds, muttered, "That's nice, son." Then immediately asked if I'd seen Tyler's batting stats in the paper that morning. Like, are you fucking kidding me? This was basically my entire childhood. My mom would spend hours making Tyler's favorite meals before his games. Gotta make sure my all-star has his energy. But when I had a bike show, just grab something from the fridge, Derek. Dad would leave work early for every single one of Tyler's games, but was too busy at the office to come see me win second place at the regional custom bike competition. I stopped even telling them about my competitions after a while. What was the point? And holy shit, the money they spent on Tyler. Private coaches, fancy equipment, traveling teams that went all over the state. Thousands and thousands of dollars. Meanwhile, I worked 2 jobs in high school just to afford tools and parts for my bikes. Never saw a dime from my parents for my stuff. The fucked up part is, I didn't even hate Tyler for it. He wasn't a bad kid, really. Just spoiled as hell and completely clueless about how unfair everything was. Sometimes I'd catch him looking uncomfortable when they'd shower him with praise, right after ignoring something I said. But he never spoke up. Why would he? Kid was living the dream. By the time I turned 18, I knew I had to get the fuck out of there before I lost my mind. I'd been saving every penny I could, and I managed to rent this tiny garage about 8 miles from my parents' house. Close enough that they could reach me if they ever bothered to try, but far enough that I didn't have to watch the Tyler worship service every day. I built that motorcycle repair business from absolutely nothing. No help from mom and dad, no fancy loans or family connections, just me busting my ass 16 hours a day, sleeping on a nasty old cot in the back of my shop for the first year until I could afford an actual apartment. It was hard as shit, but I was good at what I did. Word got around that I could fix and modify bikes better than the dealerships for half the price. That shop became my whole life. My dog Max would hang out with me all day, sleeping in the sun by the door while I worked. I felt like I actually mattered there, you know? Like I was worth something. And then there was this chick Mia. She moved in next door about 2 years ago and opened this cute little coffee shop. First time she walked over with a welcome to the neighborhood coffee, I nearly dropped the wrench I was holding. She was gorgeous, smart, funny, way out of my league. But for some reason, she seemed to actually enjoy hanging around and talking about bikes and engines with me. Not gonna lie, I got these stupid butterflies in my stomach whenever she'd stop by. But I kept it friendly and professional. Just normal neighbor stuff. After all, why would someone like her be interested in someone greasy like me? My family had made it pretty clear I wasn't worth much, so I figured she probably thought the same. Everything was going pretty okay. Business was good. I had my dog, my shop, and at least Mia seemed to enjoy talking to me now and then. I thought maybe my life was finally on the right track. Then came the day 2 years ago that opened my eyes on exactly where I stood with my family. It was a Tuesday. I was working on this sweet Ducati that some rich dude from Nashville had brought in for custom work. He wanted all these fancy mods that were honestly kind of a pain in the ass, but he was paying top dollar, so I wasn't complaining. Max was in his usual spot by the door, snoring away like the lazy bastard he is. I had AC/DC blasting from my crappy old speakers. I was using my plasma cutter to modify the frame. I'd done this exact same thing like 100 times before. Nothing complicated. But this time, man, I still don't know exactly what happened. Maybe the metal had some defect, maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention. All I know is 1 second I was focused on making a clean cut, and the next there was this horrible sound like metal tearing. A shower of sparks, and then the plasma cutter kicked back. Hard. The cutter sliced right through my right leg just above the knee. I remember seeing the metal glow red hot as it tore into my flesh, and the smell, holy fuck, the smell of my own burning flesh. I screamed so goddamn loud that Max jumped up barking like he was gonna fight whatever hurt me. Blood started pumping out immediately. Not just bleeding, but fucking gushing with each heartbeat. I fell backwards and cracked my head on the concrete floor, which didn't help matters. The pain, I can't even describe it. Like someone had stuck my leg in a furnace and was twisting it around. I've broken bones before, cut myself on engine parts, burned myself on exhaust pipes, but this was a whole different level. Fuck! Help! Somebody help me! I screamed. But my shop is pretty isolated. No way anyone was going to hear me over the music. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely reach for my phone. Blood was pooling under me fast, spreading across the shop floor like I'd knocked over a can of paint. I could feel my heart racing, and this cold, sweaty feeling spreading all over my body. With my bloody fingers smearing the screen, I finally managed to call my mom. When she picked up, I was gasping, barely able to get the words out. Mom, I choked out. I'm hurt really bad. The cutter, my leg, there's so much blood. I need help now. Her response was completely casual, like I'd called to ask what's for dinner. Derek, honey, we're kind of in the middle of something important. Can you call an ambulance? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, please, I begged, my voice cracking. I'm losing too much blood. I don't think I can. I need help right now. Please. I was starting to feel lightheaded, and the room was spinning. Just hold tight, Derek. We'll be there when we can, she said. And then the line went dead. She fucking hung up on me. I was lying there on the concrete, pressing my shop rag against the wound, but it was soaked through with blood in seconds. My vision was getting all tunnel-like, black, creeping in from the edges. I tried to call 911, but my fingers were too slippery with blood to hit the numbers right. Max was freaking out, kept barking, whining and nudging at my face, like he was trying to keep me awake. Smart boy. With what felt like the last bit of strength I had, I tried calling my mom again. No answer. Then my dad. Straight to voicemail. Figures. I tried to say my last prayer, but Max wouldn't let me die peacefully. Fuck, even the afterlife comes with interruptions. Just as I was about to die for the last time, I wish I did, my phone buzzed. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. I thought they told him about what happened to me, and he's checking to see what to do. Hey, Liam! His voice was loud and slurred, like he'd been drinking. I could hear music and people laughing in the background. What's up, man? Big day today. I was confused. Who's the hell is Liam now? I thought I didn't hear right anyways. I was a bit relieved. Tyler, I gasped, struggling to get the words out. Help. Accident at the shop. Bleeding bad. Need help now. There was a pause. For a second, I thought maybe he hadn't heard me. But then he laughed. Oh, crap, sorry. Thought you were someone else calling to congratulate me. We're celebrating my draft pick, man. AA Braves just signed me. $2 million contract. In the background, I heard my mom's voice. Tyler, honey, come take a picture with the scout. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. My head was spinning. I could feel the blood seeping faster under me. Tyler, I whispered, but the line had already gone dead. My dad's voice boomed in the background. That's my boy, professional baseball player. Always knew you had it in you. So there I was, bleeding out on my shop floor, while my entire family was just 8 miles away partying because Tyler got a baseball contract. They couldn't be bothered to drive 10 minutes to help me. Tyler, please, I whispered, but he had already hung up. My vision was fading fast now. The pain was starting to feel distant, replaced by this weird floating numbness. Not a good sign. I knew enough about injuries to know I was going into shock. Probably dying, this time for real. Max's barking suddenly changed, becoming more frantic. Through my fading consciousness, I heard the shop door slam open. Derek, I brought you some coffee and... Oh my God! Derek! Mia's voice. Then her face appeared above me, total horror in her eyes. I didn't like her seeing me like this. I always portrayed myself as a tough, strong dude in front of her. Derek, stay with me! Don't close your eyes! She was already on her phone, screaming at 911. I need an ambulance now! Severe laceration, arterial bleeding, patient losing consciousness. She ripped off her belt and wrapped it around my thigh, yanking it tight as a tourniquet. The pain jolted me back to consciousness for a moment. Mia, I mumbled. Don't talk. Save your strength. Her hands were covered in my blood, but she didn't hesitate for a second. The ambulance is coming. Just stay with me, Derek. Please stay with me. I wanted to tell her I didn't need an ambulance. I was already saved, right there in her arms. If this was how I went out, at least I had the best view. The last thing I remember before passing out was her eyes, filled with tears, and her voice repeating my name over and over. I later found out that Max had been barking nonstop for so long that Mia came to check what was wrong. If she hadn't shown up when she did, I wouldn't be typing this right now. The doctor told me I was about 5 minutes away from bleeding out completely. I woke up to the steady beep of hospital monitors and that weird antiseptic smell hospitals always have. My leg felt like it was on fire, but at least I was alive. Mia was asleep in the chair next to my bed, her clothes still stained with my blood. Looking at her there, even with her hair all messed up and dark circles under her eyes, I realized how lucky I was that she found me. The doctor came in a few hours later, looking all serious with his clipboard and everything. You're lucky to be alive. If your neighbor hadn't found you when she did, you would have bled out in another 5 minutes. He cleared his throat and got that look doctors get when they're about to drop some bad news. The bad news is, the damage to your leg was extensive. The plasma cutter severed your femoral artery and caused significant nerve and muscle damage. We've managed to save the leg, but... He paused, and I could tell he was trying to find a nice way to say whatever was coming next. You'll need multiple surgeries, and there's a high probability you won't regain full function. This kind of injury, it's likely you won't be able to stand for long periods again, which means I can't work on bikes anymore. I finished for him. The words felt like rocks in my mouth. My entire life, my business, my identity, everything I'd built for myself was gone in a single moment of carelessness. I tried to wrap my head around it all. What the hell was I supposed to do now? Mia woke up then and immediately came to my side, taking my hand. I was so scared, she whispered. There was so much blood, and you were so pale. I thought I was going to lose you. I tried to smile for her sake. Thanks for saving my life. She squeezed my hand. Have your parents been here? I tried calling the number in your emergency contacts. Huh, my parents. I just shook my head. I was too tired to explain the whole fucked up situation. Then, right on cue, my phone rang. It was my dad. For a split second, I thought maybe they actually gave a shit and were calling to check on me. Dad? I answered, hating myself for still hoping. His voice came through, not concerned, just all businesslike. Derek, your mother and I need to borrow $25,000 for Tyler's equipment and relocation expenses for his new team. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. No, how are you? No, we heard you were hurt. Just straight to asking for money for Tyler. Again. I'm in the hospital, I said slowly, my voice shaking because I was trying not to completely lose my shit. I almost died yesterday. Where were you when I called begging for help? There was an awkward pause before my dad responded dismissively. Don't be so dramatic, Derek. It was just a cut. Just a cut? I couldn't hold back anymore. I nearly bled to death. The doctor said another 5 minutes and I would have died. And you were all too busy celebrating Tyler's baseball contract to care. Mia was staring at me, shouting, her eyes wide. Look, my dad said, sounding annoyed like I was wasting his time. We're sorry you got hurt, but Tyler's signing is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This is important. And my life isn't? I hated how pathetic I sounded. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. We need that money by next week, he finally said. I hung up without another word. Then I opened my banking app and just stared at it. For 5 years, I'd been sending my parents $1,000 a month to help out with expenses. I always figured it was the right thing to do, you know? They were struggling a bit with the mortgage, or so they said. Now I knew where that money was really going. Straight into Tyler's baseball career. With a few taps, I canceled the automatic transfer. Done. 5 years of giving them my hard-earned money, and they couldn't even be bothered to help me when I was dying. Mia sat back down, looking shocked. Derek, I couldn't help overhearing, did your parents really not come when you called them? Before I found you? I told her everything. About growing up as the forgotten son. About calling them yesterday and being ignored while they celebrated Tyler. About years of sending them money that they just funneled to my golden boy brother. By the time I finished, she looked like she wanted to punch something. That's not family, she said, her voice shaking. That's not how parents are supposed to act. That's just fucked up. She stayed with me through that whole first week in the hospital. Every day bringing me decent food because hospital food is trash, helping me figure out the TV remote, just talking to me about normal stuff to keep my mind off things. Nobody had ever done anything like that for me before. But then I got a text from Tyler. Hey bro, heard you got hurt. That sucks. Also, did you tell mom and dad you won't help with my expenses? Not cool, man. Family helps family. I didn't even bother responding. The next day, my mom called and left a voicemail. Derek, honey, I know you're upset, but this is Tyler's big break. We really need that money. Call us back. Mia was there when I played the voicemail. She took my phone and deleted it. You don't need that negativity right now, she said. Then she surprised me by taking my hand. You know what? I'm going to be your family now. Me and Max. Something about the way she said it made my chest feel tight in a completely different way than the pain meds. When she looked at me, it wasn't with pity. It was something else. Something I wasn't used to seeing directed at me. The doctors told me I'd need at least 2 more surgeries and months of physical therapy. The medical bills were already piling up, and my crappy insurance was only covering about half. I was looking at debt that would take years to pay off. Plus, I couldn't work. My shop was sitting empty, and I still had rent to pay on it. I'm screwed, I told Mia one night, when the reality of it all hit me. I can't work. I can't pay my bills. I can't keep my shop. Everything I built is just gone. She squeezed my hand. We'll figure it out. I'm not going anywhere. That night, after she left, I lay in the hospital bed, thinking about how my parents couldn't be bothered to drive 8 miles to save my life. But Mia, who I'd known for less than 2 years, was by my side every day. Some family you're born with, some family you find. And sometimes the family you find is worth a hell of a lot more than the one you were born with. When the nurse came in to check my vitals, she noticed I was still awake. You should get some rest, she said. Your girlfriend can come back tomorrow. I didn't correct her about Mia being my girlfriend. For the first time since the accident, I fell asleep with something almost like hope. The next few months were a complete shit show. Recovery from an injury like mine isn't just painful, it's humiliating. I went from being a guy who could rebuild an entire motorcycle engine to someone who needed help getting to the bathroom. 3 surgeries in 2 months. The first one was to repair more of the damage to my leg. Second was to deal with some infection that popped up. Third was to try to fix some of the nerve damage. Each time they wheeled me into the OR, I wondered if this would be the one that finally fixed me. Each time I woke up, the doctors had that same careful look on their faces. The doctor had been right. I'd never stand long enough to work on bikes again. At least not the way I used to. 8, 10 hours on my feet, working under bikes, crouching, lifting heavy parts. That was never happening again. My shop sat empty. I still had to pay rent on it, which was draining what little savings I had. The medical bills were insane. Even with insurance, I was looking at over $80,000. The health insurance I had covered maybe half the surgeries, and that was after fighting with them on the phone for hours. Mia was the only thing keeping me from completely losing my shit. She'd drive me to appointments, help with my exercises, and stay late into the evening just talking about normal stuff to distract me. Her coffee shop was doing okay, so she started bringing me dinner when she figured out, correctly, that I was skipping meals to save money. One evening, as she was helping me back into my apartment after therapy, my leg was in a brace and I was still on crutches, I finally got the balls to ask why she was doing all this. I mean, I couldn't decide if she had a crush on me, or was that just a pity project over a lonely loser? Because I care about you, dummy, she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Then she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't some perfect movie moment. I was gross and sweaty from PT, probably smelled like hospital, and was balancing awkwardly on my crutches. But for the first time since the accident, I felt like maybe my life wasn't completely over. I've had a crush on you since the day I moved in next door, she admitted, blushing a little. I kept bringing you coffee hoping you'd ask me out. I thought you were just being nice, I said, feeling like the biggest idiot on the planet. She laughed. I don't bring coffee to all the neighbors, Derek. Makes sense. 2 weeks later, she moved into my apartment. It happened naturally. She was spending most nights there anyway, helping me out. She said it was just more practical this way, but I could tell there was more to it. It should have been weird going from neighbors to roommates to whatever we were now, but it wasn't. It felt right. During all this, did my family ever call to check how I was doing? Take a wild guess. The only contact I got was my mom texting to ask if I'd reconsidered helping with Tyler's expenses. I blocked her number after that. I was starting to panic about money. My savings were almost gone. Bills were piling up and I couldn't work. I had no idea what I was going to do. My whole identity was wrapped up in being a motorcycle mechanic. What the hell else was I qualified to do? What am I going to do, Mia? I asked one night, staring at the ceiling. I can't go back to what I was doing before. I'm fucking useless now. She propped herself up on her elbow and looked down at me. You're not useless. You're just different now. You still know more about motorcycles than anyone in this town. I snorted. Fat lot of good that does me if I can't work on them. So don't work on them, she said. Teach other people how to work on them. I looked at her like she was crazy. Who the hell would want to learn from me? Are you kidding? That kid Jamie is always hanging around your shop asking questions. Start with him. Jamie was this 19-year-old who had been lurking around my shop for months before the accident, asking about bikes. Annoying as hell, but earnest. The next day, I called him up. Want to learn how to rebuild a carburetor? I asked. He showed up at my apartment an hour later, looking like I'd just offered him $1,000,000. I taught him from my kitchen table, using diagrams and small engine parts I could work on while sitting down. It wasn't fancy, but the kid was eating it up. I charged him $20 per session, which wasn't much, but it was something. Jamie told his friends. Soon I had 3 students, then 5. I moved the lessons to my garage, where I could at least have some proper tools around. It still wasn't much money, but it was enough to make the minimum payments on my medical bills and keep the lights on. Mia watched all this with this smug, I told you so look on her face. You're a good teacher, she said one night. You ever think about making it official? Like a real trade school kind of thing? I laughed at it, but kept the idea in mind. My leg wasn't getting much better, though. The doctors said I'd probably always have pain, a limp, and always need to limit how long I stood. Some days were better than others, but I was starting to accept that this was my new normal. 4 months after the accident, I was finally well enough to go back to my shop. Not to work like before, that was never happening again, but to try this new teaching thing for real. I'd set up a small classroom area with some folding chairs and a whiteboard. The actual work area was still fully equipped, but now it was where my students would learn hands-on. My little school had 6 regular students by then, mostly guys in their late teens or early 20s who wanted to learn motorcycle repair, but couldn't afford real trade school. I charged enough to keep the lights on, but not so much that these kids couldn't afford it. It wasn't making me rich, but between that and Mia's help, I was staying afloat. Then, out of nowhere, while I was sitting at my desk going over some carburetor diagrams for the next day's lesson, when I heard the shop door open. Mia was at the counter. She'd started helping out at the shop when she wasn't running her coffee place. "Derek, your parents are here," she called back to me, her voice tight. My stomach dropped to my feet. I hadn't seen them since before the accident. They walked in looking exactly the same as always. Neither of them even glanced at my leg brace or the cane I was now using to get around. "Derek," my dad said, getting straight to business as usual. "We need to talk to you about something important." I waited, not offering them a seat or anything. Why should I? "Tyler's having some problems with the team," Mom jumped in, adjusting her designer purse on her shoulder. "The contract had some fine print we didn't anticipate, and he needs to buy out part of his agreement. It's a legal thing." Dad nodded gravely. "It's going to cost around $450,000 to fix this situation. We've looked at all our options, and the only solution is for you to sell this place." I just stared at them, not sure if I should laugh or scream. "You want me to sell my business to bail Tyler out of a contract problem? This shop is just sitting here while you're recovering," Mom said, gesturing around like my entire livelihood was just some old junk I was hoarding. "If you sell it now, we can use the money to help Tyler, and there would be enough left for you to start something new once you're better." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything, after them leaving me to die, they had the nerve to ask me to sell my business for Tyler? "Let me get this straight," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice level. "You want me to sell the business that I built from nothing? The business that I can still run even with my injury? So Tyler can get out of a contract that he signed without reading?" Dad frowned. "Don't be selfish, Derek. This is your brother's future we're talking about. And stop acting like this is a real business. What, teaching kids how to screw in bolts? That's not a business." I almost fell out of my chair. Selfish? Me? Before I could say anything, Mia stepped forward from the counter, her eyes blazing. "Selfish? Are you serious right now?" My parents looked at her like they'd just noticed she existed. "Derek almost died," she said, her voice sharp and shaking with anger. "He called you, begging for help, bleeding out on the floor, and you ignored him. You were too busy celebrating Tyler to even care. He's been through 3 surgeries, might never fully recover, and neither of you visited him. Not once. And now, you have the audacity to show up here and ask him to give up everything he's built just to bail Tyler out of another mess?" The room went dead silent, but Mia's words hung in the air like a slap. Mom looked offended. "Who are you? This is a family matter. You stay out of it." "No," I cut her off. "Mia is family. She's more family than either of you have ever been to me." I pointed to the door. "Get out, and don't come back." Dad's face turned red. "You ungrateful! Get out!" I shouted, standing up despite the pain in my leg. They left, Dad slamming the door behind them hard enough to rattle the windows. Mia came to my side as I sank back into my chair, my leg throbbing like a bitch. "I'm sorry," she said, taking my hand. "I shouldn't have interfered." I squeezed her hand. Number U said exactly what needed to be said. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I felt bad about what happened. I didn't. But because I was still in shock that they would have the balls to ask me to sell my shop. After everything they'd done. After everything they hadn't done when I needed them. The next morning, I made a decision. I went to the bank and removed my parents from my emergency contact list. I called my lawyer. Okay, not my lawyer, a friend who happens to be a lawyer, and had him draw up a will, leaving everything to Mia. I even called the hospital and made sure they knew my parents were not to be given any information about me if anything happened again. I was cutting every single tie. A week later, Mia and I were cleaning up the shop after the day's lesson when she suddenly said, "I think we should make this official." "Make what official?" I asked. She gestured around. "This, the school. Let's actually register it as a trade school. Get some certification. Do it right." I looked at her like she was crazy. "That would cost a fortune. Paperwork, licenses, equipment upgrades." "So?" She grinned. "My coffee shop is doing great. I've got savings. We could be partners." "Business partners?" I asked. She came over and kissed me on the cheek. That too. 2 weeks later, we submitted the paperwork to create Summers Motorcycle Technical Institute. Fancy name for what was basically just me teaching kids in my old shop, but Mia insisted we make it sound professional. You know what's funny? My entire life I'd tried to get my parents to notice me, to be proud of me. And now that I was finally building something good, something that might actually work, I didn't give a crap if they knew or not. Their opinion didn't matter anymore. That night, as Mia and I were celebrating with takeout, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Tyler, the first I'd heard from him since that bullshit family helps family text. Mom and Dad are freaking out. They might lose the house because of my contract thing. Can you help? I stared at the phone for a long time, thinking about all the years I'd put up with their crap, and the way they trying to spin everything. Still, they have the audacity to call me and ask for help, and guilt trip me. I typed, "And you're my brother, but none of you acted like family when I was bleeding out on the floor. I've got a real family now. Good luck with your baseball career." Then I blocked his number too. Mia wrapped her arms around me from behind. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah. Actually, I think I am." I felt completely at peace with my decision. They'd made their choice a long time ago. Now I was making mine. Recently, I found out through an old high school friend that my parents ended up losing the house after all. They couldn't make the mortgage payments after spending everything they had on Tyler's contract buyout. Apparently, they moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of town. Dad had to come out of retirement and take a job at the local hardware store. Mom started working part-time at a department store. Karma's a bitch, I guess. Whenever I catch myself feeling bad for them, I remember the sight of my own blood pooling around me while they popped champagne for Tyler, and that feeling disappears pretty damn quick. As for Tyler, his baseball career crashed and burned spectacularly. After all that money spent to fix his contract issues, he showed up to training out of shape and with a major attitude problem. The team gave him multiple warnings before cutting him loose after just one season. Last I heard, he's working as an assistant coach at some small-town high school, still talking about his almost pro career. The golden child finally had to face reality. He wasn't special, just spoiled. Sometimes I wonder if he ever realized how much our parents sacrificed for him and how little they gave a shit about me. And yeah, it's been 3 years now since everything went down. Mia and I got married last spring in a small ceremony with just our friends and her family. Our motorcycle school now has its official certification and a waiting list 2 months long. We're even thinking about expanding to a second location. My leg still gives me trouble, and I'll always walk with a limp, but I've learned to work around it. Some nights I still wake up in a cold sweat, phantom pain shooting through my leg, memories of that day still fresh. But Mia's always there, holding me until I fall back asleep. My old family might have left me to die, but my new one gives me a reason to live, and that's more than enough for me. So what would you have done in my shoes? Cut them off like I did? Try to forgive? I'm curious what other people think. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right call, but then I look at what I've built from the ashes of that day, and I think maybe, just maybe, it was the only call I could have made. Edit. Thanks for all the comments and support. For those asking, yes, Max is still doing great. He's getting old and lazy, but still the best shop dog around. Story 6. This story is titled, "My sister-in-law falsely accused me of SA, and my family took her side." 3 years later, the truth came out when she cheated with her dad's friend. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hi Reddit, I'm Ryan, 32 male, and I grew up in a small town in Kentucky. Life was pretty typical, small community, high school football games on Fridays. Everyone knew everyone. I have an older brother, Ethan, who's 35. Despite the age gap, we were really close growing up. Ethan was the kind of guy everyone looked up to. He was the star of our high school soccer team, the guy who could charm anyone, and the golden child in our family. I wasn't as outgoing. I was more into video games and art, and I struggled a lot with confidence, especially during middle school. Ethan was always there for me, though. He taught me how to talk to girls, well, tried to, and gave me pep talks when I felt like I didn't fit in. He made sure I never got bullied, and even let me tag along when he hung out with his friends. So yeah, I idolized him. After high school, we went our separate ways. Ethan went into sales, climbing the ladder fast, and I became a graphic designer. But still, we made it a point to stay close. We'd talk every week, and when we visited our parents' home, it was like nothing had changed. A few years ago, Ethan met Julia at a work conference in Chicago. She was a freelance consultant, smart, confident, and according to Ethan, absolutely stunning. He fell head over heels. I didn't meet her until they'd been dating for a few months, and honestly, from the start, something about her didn't sit right with me. The first time I met Julia was at a family BBQ Ethan brought her to. Everyone seemed impressed. Julia was super chatty, cracking jokes and blending in easily, but then she started making some questionable comments. At one point, she pointed out one of Ethan's friends and said, "Wow, that guy is a total dilf. Don't let him near your single coworkers, Ethan." I remember glancing at Ethan, expecting him to be annoyed or at least embarrassed, but he just laughed it off. Later, she made a joke about how if Ethan ever got boring, she'd just trade up. I tried brushing it off, thinking, maybe she's just joking around, but it didn't sit right with me. After the BBQ, I told Ethan I thought Julia's comments were kind of inappropriate. He waved it off, saying, "That's just how she is. She's confident and funny. You're overthinking it, man." So I dropped it. I didn't want to start any drama. As their relationship got more serious, Julia's behavior became harder to ignore. They got engaged a year later, and by then, she was a constant presence at family gatherings. She had this way of being the center of attention, loud, opinionated, and always cracking jokes. Sometimes it felt like she was trying too hard, but I kept my mouth shut. It wasn't until their wedding that things really started bothering me. During the rehearsal dinner, Julia made a joke about one of my friends, Eric, who was helping out with the event. She loudly commented, "Eric's got that rugged lumberjack thing going on. If I weren't taken, I'd be sliding into his DMs right now." I could see Ethan shift uncomfortably, but he still didn't say anything. Afterward, Sarah, my fiance, and I talked about it, and she admitted she didn't like Julia either. "She's a lot," Sarah said, and not in a good way. At their wedding reception, Julia was even more over the top. She made a toast where she joked about how Ethan won her over with his wallet and not his dancing. Everyone laughed, but I couldn't help but cringe. Who says that on their wedding day? By this point, I was pretty much done trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. Ethan was happy, though, and I didn't want to rock the boat. But things got worse after they got married. Julia started making bolder comments, especially about me and Sarah. One time, we were at a family gathering, and Julia turned to Sarah and asked, "How did you end up with Ryan? You seem like the kind of girl who'd go for someone who's, the life of the party." Sarah handled it gracefully, just laughing it off, but I could tell she was annoyed. Another time, Julia made a crack about my job, saying, "Must be nice to doodle for a living. I should have gone into graphic design instead of consulting." Ethan laughed nervously, and I felt my blood boiling, but I bit my tongue. The final straw for me was at our parents' anniversary party. Julia walked in wearing a dress that was, let's just say, way too revealing for a family event. She spent the entire night making flirty comments to random people, including some of Ethan's coworkers who were there. At one point, she made a joke about how one of the older men reminded her of a handsome version of her dad. When I brought this up to Ethan later, he snapped at me. "Why do you always have something negative to say about Julia? She's my wife now, Ryan. You need to accept that." I realized then that I couldn't talk to him about her anymore. He was completely blinded by her, and no matter how inappropriate her behavior was, he wasn't going to see it. I wish I had been more direct with him, or tried harder to get him to see what was going on. But at the time, I figured it was his life, and as long as Julia wasn't directly hurting me, it wasn't my place to interfere. Of course, I didn't know how bad things were going to get. Julia wasn't just annoying or inappropriate, she was manipulative, and she knew exactly how to push people's buttons. Ethan and Julia had been married for about 6 months when Julia started randomly showing up at my apartment. At first, I thought it was just her being friendly, after all the mean comments she used to throw about me. Maybe Ethan talked to her, but looking back now, it was super weird. The first time she came over, Sarah wasn't home. I was in the middle of working on a freelance project when Julia knocked on my door. She said she'd locked herself out of her car and was waiting for a locksmith. I didn't think much of it and let her in, assuming she'd wait a few minutes and then leave once the locksmith arrived. Instead, she stayed for almost an hour, chatting about random stuff. Her work, Ethan, their dog, whatever popped into her head. At one point, she commented on how cozy my apartment was and said it felt like a safe space. I wasn't sure what to say to that, so I just kind of nodded and mumbled something about Sarah decorating the place. The locksmith finally called her back, and she left. I didn't mention it to Ethan because, honestly, I thought it was just a one-off. But then it happened again. A week later, she showed up with this random thank you basket for Sarah and me. It was full of fancy snacks, cheese, crackers, chocolates. She said it was for always being so supportive of her and Ethan. I thought it was a nice gesture, but it felt a little over the top. She ended up staying way longer than I was comfortable with. Sarah wasn't home again, so it was just me and Julia. She sat on the couch, chatting about how stressful her job was, and how hard it was adjusting to married life. I tried to steer the conversation toward Ethan like, well, I'm sure Ethan helps you out, but she just kind of laughed and said, oh, you know how he is. After she left, I told Sarah about it, and she raised an eyebrow. That's odd, she said. Why is she coming over when I'm not here? I don't know, I replied. But it's starting to feel weird. Breaker, we agreed that if Julia showed up again, I'd find a way to cut the visit short. The turning point was one rainy evening. It was one of those dreary days where you just want to stay in and relax. Sarah was out running errands, and I was catching up on a Netflix series when Julia knocked on my door. She was soaking wet, holding an umbrella that was clearly not doing its job. She said she and Ethan had a huge fight about their finances and that she needed someone to talk to. I hesitated but figured it would be rude to turn her away, especially since she looked so upset. I let her in and made her a cup of tea while she went on about how Ethan didn't understand her stress and how he was being too controlling about money. She sat on the couch, looking all pitiful, and I felt awkward as hell. Then she started making comments that crossed the line. She leaned back and said, "Your place is so relaxing compared to my chaotic house. It feels good to just breathe here." I didn't know what to say, so I just muttered, thanks. She kept going, saying things like, "You're such a good listener. Ethan could learn a thing or two from you." She kept trying to get closer to me, making me uncomfortable. At that point, I stood up and moved to the chair across the room, trying to put some distance between us. I told her, "Look, I'm sure you and Ethan can work things out. He's a good guy." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't really listening. Thankfully, Ethan showed up about 20 minutes later. As soon as he walked in, Julia's entire vibe changed. She went from being teary and dramatic to cheerful and casual, like nothing had happened. She even laughed and said, "Oh, I was just telling Ryan about how stressed I've been lately." Ethan didn't seem suspicious, and they left shortly after. I thought that was the end of it. But then, about a week later, Ethan showed up at my apartment, and he wasn't happy. He barged in, yelling about how Julia had told him I'd made a pass at her that night. She said I tried to kiss her and that she barely got away before Ethan arrived. I was completely blindsided. "Are you serious right now?" I asked. "That's not what happened at all." Ethan didn't want to hear it. He accused me of trying to ruin his marriage and called me a jealous loser who couldn't stand to see him happy. I tried to explain what really happened, but he wasn't listening. He got in my face, and before I knew it, he shoved me hard enough that I stumbled back. Sarah walked in right at that moment and immediately stepped between us, yelling at Ethan to back off. After Ethan stormed out, Sarah and I sat down, trying to process what just happened. I was furious. Not just at Ethan for believing Julia's lies, but at Julia for even making the accusation in the first place. The next day, my parents called. Somehow, Julia and Ethan had already gotten to them. My mom started with, "Ryan, we need to talk about what happened with Julia." She told us everything. I tried to explain my side, but she cut me off, saying, "You always misunderstood her friendliness. Julia's always been such a sweet girl, and this time, you've gone so far." My dad chimed in, accusing me of being jealous of Ethan's perfect life and saying I needed to grow up. That conversation was the nail in the coffin. My parents weren't even interested in hearing my side. They just automatically sided with Ethan and Julia. Sarah was the only one who truly had my back. She told me, "We're not dealing with this nonsense anymore. Let them believe what they want. You and I know the truth, and that's what matters." She was right, but it didn't make it hurt any less. My own family had turned on me over something that never even happened. It felt like everything I'd built with Ethan over the years, our bond, our trust, was completely destroyed. At that moment, I decided I was done trying to prove myself to people who didn't want to believe me. If they wanted to side with Julia, that was on them. Life was weird for a while. Sarah and I didn't run away like Ethan and my parents tried to spin it. We just wanted a fresh start. We had already been thinking about moving to Arizona for better job opportunities and warmer weather. So when everything with my family hit the fan, it felt like the right time to go. We packed up, found a cozy apartment in Phoenix, and threw ourselves into work and building a new life. Sarah got a great gig as a project manager, and I landed a role with a design firm that actually valued creativity. For the first time in months, life felt normal again. It wasn't perfect, though. I still thought about what happened back home more than I'd like to admit. Ethan and I hadn't spoken since that blow-up at my apartment, and my parents had made it clear they weren't interested in hearing my side of things. They were all in with Julia's version of events. I tried to focus on the positives. Sarah and I loved exploring the area. Weekend hikes, trying every taco spot we could find, and soaking up the sunshine. It felt good to have a little bubble of peace, far away from the drama. Then, 3 years later, on one random Tuesday night, I got a DM on Instagram that flipped everything upside down. The message was from a woman named Hannah. I didn't recognize her at first, but she introduced herself as someone who used to be friends with Julia. Apparently, Hannah had been on Julia's Pam Instagram account, the one Julia used to vent and post stuff she didn't want most people to see. Hannah said she'd been keeping tabs on the whole situation because she felt guilty about staying quiet when Julia falsely accused me. I was skeptical at first. Why would this random woman reach out now? But then she sent me screenshots. And holy crap, they were bad. According to Hannah, Julia had done this kind of thing before. Twice, actually. The first time was in college. She accused a guy in her dorm of making inappropriate advances toward her at a party. There was an investigation, and even though the guy was cleared, his reputation was trashed. People stopped hanging out with him, and he eventually transferred schools. The second time was at her old job. Julia accused one of her coworkers of harassment. HR got involved, but the guy was cleared after they reviewed emails and camera footage. Still, he quit not long after because of all the whispers and awkwardness in the office. The worst part? Hannah sent me screenshots from Julia's spam account that were dated around the time of her accusation against me. In one post, Julia joked about how easy it is to make people believe what you want if you cry hard enough. In another, she referred to Ethan as her boring ATM and said she was counting down the days until I don't have to deal with this crap anymore. My stomach dropped. I knew Ethan had no idea about any of this. Sarah sat next to me while I read through the messages and looked at the screenshots. "You need to save all of this," she said, grabbing my laptop so we could back everything up. Part of me wanted to just delete the DM and move on. I didn't want to get dragged back into the chaos. But another part of me felt like I needed to know the full story. So, I kept talking to Hannah. She told me Julia had started distancing herself from their friend group about a year before her wedding. "She got really weird," Hannah said. Like she didn't want anyone getting too close or knowing too much about her life. When I asked why Hannah hadn't come forward sooner, she admitted she was scared. Julia was manipulative and had a way of turning people against each other. "She'd find a way to make me look like the bad guy," Hannah said. "But when I saw what she did to you, I couldn't stay quiet anymore." Hearing all this was a lot. I felt angry, vindicated, and sick all at the same time. For months, I'd been painted as the bad guy, someone who would betray his own brother, while Julia was out here bragging about manipulating everyone. Sarah was my rock through all of this. She kept reminding me that none of this was my fault, and that I didn't owe anyone an explanation or apology. But I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. How could he be so blind? Julia wasn't just toxic, she was dangerous. She'd lied to him, manipulated him, and humiliated him behind his back. I felt like I had some closure. Julia's lies had caused so much damage, but now I had proof that I wasn't the crazy one. And yet, there was a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. If Julia had a history of doing this to other people, what was stopping her from doing it again? Or worse, what if she turned her manipulations on Ethan in an even more destructive way? So here's where everything really started to fall apart for Julia. I honestly didn't think things could get messier, but man, was I wrong. After Hannah sent me all those screenshots from Julia's spam account, I sat on them for a bit. I wasn't sure what to do with the information. Sarah and I agreed that reaching out to Ethan might not be the best move. He had made it clear where his loyalty was, and I wasn't ready to deal with more of his nonsense. But as it turns out, I didn't have to say anything. Ethan found out the hard way. Apparently, Julia had gotten too comfortable with her little double life. According to Hannah, one night while Julia was showering, Ethan noticed her phone buzzing nonstop on the kitchen counter. Out of curiosity, or maybe suspicion, he checked it. What he found wasn't just bad, it was nuclear. There were explicit texts, hotel confirmations, and even photos between Julia and an older guy. And when I say older, I mean way older. This guy wasn't just her sugar daddy, he was her dad's longtime business associate, someone Ethan had probably shaken hands with at family events. The messages made it crystal clear what was going on. They were meeting up during her work trips and spending weekends together at fancy resorts. She even bragged in one of the texts about how easy it was to get Ethan to believe her lies. When Julia got out of the shower, Ethan confronted her immediately. From what I've heard, it wasn't pretty. Ethan demanded an explanation, and Julia, being Julia, tried to spin it. She told him the messages were just fantasy roleplay, and that it wasn't what it looked like. Ethan didn't buy it. So then she switched tactics. She accused him of being neglectful, saying he worked too much, didn't pay enough attention to her, and basically drove her to seek comfort elsewhere. Classic deflection. But Ethan wasn't having it. He kicked her out that night. Julia tried to argue, but Ethan packed her bags and told her to leave. Their marriage unraveled fast after that. Ethan told our parents what had happened, but shockingly, they still tried to defend Julia. My mom said, "Marriage is hard, Ethan. Maybe you should go to counseling." Yeah, because couples counseling totally fixes infidelity and secret sugar daddy situations. But here's where karma finally caught up with her. Hannah wasn't the only one who knew about Julia's sugar daddy. Apparently, the guy's wife had been suspicious for a while. She started digging and eventually found proof of the affair. Texts, emails, everything. And she didn't hold back. The wife made everything public. She shared the screenshots with their entire social circle, which included a lot of people in their business community. At this point, Julia's life was in complete free fall, and things just kept getting worse for her. The first major blow was to her career. Julia had built this image of herself as this successful, polished consultant, someone who could land clients and close deals like a pro. But once her affair became public knowledge, and with her name tied to a messy divorce, her professional network wanted nothing to do with her. Hannah, who was still feeding me updates, told me that several companies she had worked with started quietly blacklisting her. It wasn't just because of the affair. People were finding out about her history of manipulation, her false accusations, and the general chaos she left in her wake. Nobody wanted to risk their reputation by associating with her. It was like a domino effect. Clients dropped her, contracts weren't renewed, and even smaller firms stopped returning her calls. The consulting world is small, and word travels fast. Julia's name had become toxic. On top of that, her friends started pulling away. A lot of the people who had initially taken her side during the drama with me and Ethan started to see her for who she really was. Some of them had their own stories about Julia stirring up trouble or making inappropriate comments. And once they realized this wasn't just a one-time thing, they cut ties. Even her family had enough. From what I heard, her dad was furious about the affair, not just because it was with one of his business associates, but because it dragged their family name into the mud. Julia had always been his golden child, the one he bragged about at parties and family gatherings. Now she was an embarrassment. He disowned her completely. Julia's mom was apparently more conflicted about it, but she eventually followed suit. They didn't want anything to do with her. Now, you'd think at this point, Julia might step back and reevaluate her life choices. But nope. Instead, she decided to double down on playing the victim. She started a GoFundMe titled something like, "Help a Domestic Abuse Survivor Rebuild Her Life." The description was full of vague accusations about Ethan being controlling and emotionally abusive. She even mentioned estranged family members, that'd be me, who abandoned her in her time of need. For a brief moment, it seemed like she might actually get away with it. A few people donated, probably out of pity, or because they didn't know the full story. But then, the internet did what the internet does best. People started sharing screenshots of her messages, posts from her spam account, and all the evidence of her lies. It didn't take long for the comments on her GoFundMe page to turn brutal. Domestic abuse survivor? More like a serial liar. Funny how she's the victim in every story. Starting to think the common denominator is you, Julia. Y'all better Google her name before donating. She's not who she says she is. The backlash was intense. Within a week, Julia took the page down, but the damage was done. Any remaining credibility she had was gone. Then she disappeared from social media altogether. She deleted her Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn accounts. No more selfies in luxury hotels, no more motivational quotes about living your best life. It was like she wanted to erase herself from the internet. For a while, I didn't hear anything about her. Sarah and I were focused on our own lives, work, weekend trips, and just enjoying the peace and quiet. But then Hannah reached out again with one last update. Apparently, Julia had moved to a small town in Nevada, completely off the radar. She was working as a waitress at some diner, far from the life of designer bags and fancy parties she used to flaunt. Hannah even sent me a picture someone had taken of her at the diner. She looked different, tired, like life had knocked her down a few pegs. She was wearing a plain uniform, her hair pulled back in a way that felt practical, not stylish. I didn't feel sorry for her. Julia had brought this on herself, but I couldn't help but think about how far she'd fallen. This was someone who had spent years building a facade, only to have it crumble in the most spectacular way. Julia's world completely collapsed. She'd lost her career, her friends, her family, and her shiny image. All that was left was the person underneath, and it turns out there wasn't much there. I finally felt like I could move forward. But of course, life wasn't going to make it that easy. You'd think after Julia torched her reputation and Ethan saw her for what she was, things would settle down. Nope. Instead, the drama just shifted direction. It started with my parents. They'd been radio silent for a while after Ethan kicked Julia out and their marriage imploded. Honestly, I thought they might finally realize how badly they screwed up by taking her side. But instead of apologizing, they came at me with excuses. The first call I got was from my mom. She didn't start with an apology or even a question about how I was doing. Instead, she jumped right into it. "Ryan, your brother is really struggling," she said, her voice all shaky. "This whole situation has been so hard on him. He's depressed. He needs his family right now." I almost laughed. "You mean the family that turned their backs on me? The one that let Julia lie about me without even asking for my side?" "Ryan," she said, in that tone she always used when I was a kid, and she wanted me to feel guilty. "You know we didn't mean to hurt you. It was just complicated. But Ethan is your brother, and he needs you." I didn't let her finish. "Mom, I'm done being the scapegoat. If Ethan wants to talk to me, he knows where to find me. But I'm not playing this game where I swoop in and pretend everything's fine. That's not happening." She tried again, but I cut her off and hung up. I could feel my blood boiling, but I didn't regret standing my ground. A few days later, Ethan called me. "Ryan," he started, "I just want to say I'm sorry. I should have believed you. I should have seen through Julia." It was the first time I'd heard him admit he was wrong, and it caught me off guard. But I wasn't about to let him off the hook that easily. "I appreciate the apology, Ethan," I said, "but you didn't just believe her. You came to my home, accused me of something I didn't do, and got physical with me. That wasn't just Julia's fault. That was you." There was a long pause. "I know," he finally said. "I've been in therapy since everything happened. I'm trying to work through it. I miss my brother." I told him the truth. "I miss the brother I grew up with too. But that guy isn't who you've been for a long time. You need to fix yourself before we can even think about fixing anything between us." He said he understood, but I could tell he wasn't happy. It was like he wanted me to just say, "All good, bro," and sweep everything under the rug. But that's not who I am anymore. Meanwhile, my parents were still trying to meddle. My dad called a week later saying Ethan was considering selling the house because he couldn't afford to keep it after the divorce. "Maybe you could help him out," Dad suggested. "Just until he gets back on his feet." "Are you serious?" I asked, trying not to lose it. "You want me to bail him out after everything? How about you sell something and help him?" Dad got defensive. "Ryan, he's your brother. Family helps family." "Funny how that only applies when it benefits Ethan," I shot back. "Where was that energy when I needed you to have my back? Don't call me about this again." I hung up before he could say anything else. Sarah was proud of me for standing my ground. "They're never going to change," she said. "The only thing you can control is how much you let them into your life." She was right. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control instead of letting them dictate how things would go. As for Ethan, he kept trying to reach out. He'd send texts asking if we could grab a drink or meet up to talk. I told him I wasn't ready. Maybe someday, but not now. He needed to deal with his issues without dragging me into them. In the meantime, Sarah and I kept building the life we wanted. We bought our first house in Arizona, a small, cozy place with a big backyard for the dog we'd been talking about getting. We spent weekends exploring new hiking trails and trying out every mom-and-pop diner we could find. The best part? Sarah and I were finally starting to talk about starting a family. After everything we'd been through, the idea of bringing a kid into the world felt like a fresh chapter, a chance to create the kind of family I'd always wanted. My parents tried to guilt me about not visiting for the holidays, but I stood firm. "We're busy with work and the house," I told them. The truth was, I didn't want to be around their drama. I didn't owe them anything, not my time, not my forgiveness, and definitely not my attention. They made their choice when they took Julia's side, when they believed her lies without even asking for my side of the story. What they did wasn't just hurtful. It was something I'll never forget, and I'll never forgive. Ethan didn't just betray me, he turned on me in the worst way possible. My parents stood there and let it happen, all while treating me like I was some jealous troublemaker instead of their son. They threw me under the bus for someone who turned out to be a liar, a manipulator, and frankly, a disaster. And now they think they can just waltz back into my life like nothing happened? Not a chance. Family is supposed to have your back. They're supposed to stand by you when things get tough, not throw you to the wolves. My parents and Ethan showed me exactly where I stand with them. And I'm not going to pretend that didn't happen just because they suddenly want to play nice. I finally blocked their numbers, deleted their emails without opening them, I wasn't interested in hearing their excuses or their attempts to guilt me into reconnecting. They made their choice, and I'm making mine. Some people might say I'm being harsh or cold, but I don't see it that way. I see it as standing up for myself. Because if I let them back into my life after everything they did, what's stopping them from doing it again? Nothing. And I'm not giving them that chance.